This was forever ago, back when I was like 7 or maybe 9. I can't remember exactly, but I was definitely still in elementary school. I lived with my folks and my 2 older sisters in this sprawling suburban maze in Pineview Hills, Ohio. The neighborhood was the kind with never-ending cul-de-sacs and houses that all kinda looked the same, just painted different shades of beige. Even though there were a ton of other kids around, I didn't really hang out with them much. Most of my friends were from school, and they lived too far away to just show up at my door on a bike like in the movies. So I mostly did my own thing. One afternoon, my mom came back from one of her walks and told me she'd been chatting with this woman down the road. I guess they hit it off because she said the woman had a son named Jake who was around my age. She said he seemed like a good kid and that I should go meet him. I was always down to make new friends, especially if it meant getting out of the house. So I said sure. Apparently Jake's parents had already said it was cool for me to come over, and my mom made plans to drop me off the next day. To this day, I still have no clue how my parents even connected with his. They weren't the super chatty type. All I know is I got packed into the car and carted 3 streets over, to this part of the neighborhood I never really explored. Jake's place was way bigger than ours, like intimidatingly big. Their front yard was trimmed like a golf course, and the inside looked like it belonged in some catalog. Crazy high ceilings, spotless floors, not a single toy in sight, which already made me nervous. My mom made some small talk with Jake's parents at the door, but I didn't see Jake yet. Then she left. Just like that. Gone. I was standing there with these strangers and trying not to look as uncomfortable as I felt. A minute later, Jake's mom called down the hall for him to come out. He finally shuffled out of his room and, man, this kid was huge. Like not just tall, but broad. I was always kind of scrawny, and he looked like he could have passed for 12 easy. He had this messy dark hair and just sort of gave me this blank look. His parents told us to go hang out and then disappeared down the hallway. Jake told me to follow him and led me to his room, which felt more like a hotel suite than a kid's bedroom. Giant bed, shelves all perfectly arranged, not a speck of mess anywhere. He barely said 2 words, and then just pointed at the bed like, "Sit." I sat, not really sure what was going on, and then he walked over to this big plastic bin in the corner. He yanked out a Nerf gun, one of those rapid-fire kinds, and without saying a thing, started blasting me. No joke, he just stood there unloading foam darts at my face. I tried to dodge, but I wasn't fast enough. A few hit me square in the forehead, and at that point I was pretty annoyed. I asked him if I could have a Nerf gun too, thinking maybe this was his way of starting a battle. He looked at me like I had just insulted his grandma and went, "Yeah, right." Then, like some sort of action movie villain, he calmly put that one back in the bin and pulled out an even bigger one. One of those battery-powered Nerf rifles that sounded like a chainsaw when it revved up. And guess what? He lit me up all over again. Dude was cackling like a maniac while I was doing my best impression of Neo from The Matrix, ducking and dodging foam darts like my life depended on it. Spoiler, it didn't help. I kept yelling for him to knock it off, but he was way too entertained. Eventually, he emptied that monster Nerf blaster, and I was like, finally, maybe we can do literally anything else. He gave this shrug like, sure, and I thought we were done with the whole human target thing. He tossed the gun back in his toy bin, and for a second, I relaxed. That lasted, 2 seconds, because in the same move, he pulled out a freaking Nerf sword. I remember just sighing internally like, oh, come on, man. Without saying a word, he charged at me and started swinging like he was in a live-action video game. It was that stiff plastic foam stuff that doesn't look painful, but still stings when someone twice your size goes full berserker on you. He was even making swooshing noises and cracking up like this was the funniest thing in the world. I tried to block the hits with my arms, but he nailed me in the cheek at least twice. My ears were ringing, and I was just trying to not cry because I was super embarrassed more than anything. I was mad, like boiling, but I wasn't stupid. I knew if I tried to fight back, he'd flatten me. And clearly, the kid had an entire armory in that toy box, while I was unarmed and miserable. So I yelled, loud, like, "Stop it!" kind of loud. He finally froze, looked annoyed, and snapped, "Geez, quit being such a baby." I kept glancing around, wondering if his parents were ever gonna step in. Like, where the hell were they? I hadn't seen them since they vanished when I first walked in. I kept hoping one of them would pop in and be like, "Jake, knock it off." But nope. He strutted back to his Nerf stash like a warlord and dropped the sword in, then rummaged around again. I stood there, already dreading whatever was coming next. Sure enough, he pulled out this goofy-looking Nerf slingshot thing. I don't know why, but that was the final straw for me. I just thought, nope, I'm out. Without saying a word, I turned and booked it. Full-on sprint. Bolted out of his room, tore down the hall like my life depended on it. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding behind me, and then, whiz, a foam ball zipped past my ear. The guy actually tried to snipe me while I was running for my life. Still no sign of his parents. At that point, I wasn't even mad anymore, just desperate to escape. I flung the front door open and ran like hell down the driveway, past their mailbox, and didn't stop until I hit the corner of my own street. Pretty sure I looked insane, red-faced and sweating, but I didn't care. When I got home and stepped inside, my mom looked at me like I'd come back from battle. She asked why I was back so soon, and I just blurted out, "Jake's insane. I'm never going over there again." I don't totally remember how they reacted. I think they must have called his parents afterward, but if they did, nobody ever followed up with me about it. All I know is, I never saw Jake again after that day. He didn't go to my school, thank God, and he never popped up around the neighborhood. Still kinda pisses me off when I think about it. Like, dude treated me like a moving target. Who knows what else he had stashed in that box? Sometimes I still wish I'd at least landed one punch just for the principle of it. But whatever. I'm just glad I bailed when I did. So this happened a few years back when I lived in a mid-sized town called Fairhaven. I was doing my usual weekend grocery run at this Kroger right down the street from my old apartment. Nothing exciting, just the same boring list. Eggs, oat milk, frozen waffles. You get it. Anyway, I was reaching for this exact brand of salsa I always get when this woman next to me reached for the same one. She kind of laughed and said, "Ah, clearly we have good taste." I chuckled and made some dumb joke in return, and somehow that turned into a full-on 5-minute chat about snacks, spicy food, and weird roommate stories. It was random but kind of refreshing. She gave off this super chill, upbeat vibe. You know, the kind of person who seems like they're always smiling even when they talk? We didn't exchange names or anything that day. It was just a friendly little encounter in the condiment aisle, and then off we went. I honestly didn't think I'd see her again. But like 10 days later, I was back at the same store, trying to pick between two overpriced brands of granola, when I heard someone say, "No way, it's you." I turned and there she was, same sunny face, like it was totally normal to run into each other twice in 2 weeks. She walked right up, still smiling like we were old friends, and started asking how I was doing. We talked a bit more this time. I learned she'd recently moved into the area from somewhere upstate and was still getting used to Fairhaven. She mentioned working for some company downtown, something in logistics or marketing. Honestly, I blanked on the details. At the end of that conversation, she pulled out her phone and said something like, "You seem cool. We should get coffee sometime." So we swapped numbers. A few days later, we actually did grab coffee at this tiny cafe called Hazel's that I always used to go to. It was fun, nothing weird. We met up a couple more times after that, mostly chatting about random stuff, jobs, food, how annoying moving is. Fast forward a couple months and by then I figured we were friends. Not besties or anything, but definitely coffee and text memes kind of friends. Then one night out of nowhere, she texted me saying her boyfriend had broken up with her. I sent the usual, "Ugh, I'm so sorry, that sucks," kind of response. She told me it had been rough and that she was planning to leave the apartment they shared. She sounded really down, but not in a dramatic way, more like exhausted. Then she asked me if she could hang out at my place the next day for a bit, just while her ex packed up and left. She didn't want to be there for it, which honestly made sense. I figured, yeah, sure, that's what friends do, right? I told her it was totally fine, and that I'd leave the spare key under the mat since I had to work in the morning. She showed up that morning right around 8, just like she said she would. I left the key under the mat, and when I saw her through the peephole waving and smiling like usual, I didn't even feel weird about it. I told her I hoped everything went okay, and then headed out to my shift at this auto shop across town. The day flew by in that annoying, greasy hands kind of way, and I didn't hear a peep from her. No texts, no missed calls, not even a thanks again or anything. But whatever. I figured she was probably still dealing with her ex or hauling boxes or crying into a box of Cheez-Its. I didn't want to bug her. When I finally got back around 6:30, I opened my door and just froze. My apartment looked like it had been hit by a tornado on meth. The couch cushions were on the floor. One of the kitchen chairs was flipped over. Clothes, my clothes, were scattered everywhere, like someone had ransacked my closet with zero chill. My shelves were nearly empty. And the worst part? My TV was gone. So was my laptop, my iPad, a couple watches, and this tiny wooden box where I kept all my rings and old necklaces my grandma left me. Even my backup headphones and a pair of sneakers I just bought were gone. I stood there just blinking for a minute, trying to convince myself I was looking at the wrong apartment or something. I grabbed my phone and immediately shot her a message. "Hey, what happened?" It didn't go through. Weird. Tried calling, straight to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. Then I realized I wasn't just being ignored. She'd straight up blocked me. I was shaking, mostly from rage, but also that weird panic sweat you get when reality slaps you in the face. I called the cops. 2 officers came over maybe 40 minutes later, and I gave them the whole story, from salsa aisle to spare key. They took a full report and said they'd request building surveillance. I actually felt a tiny bit relieved because I thought, at least I know who did this. But no. Joke was on me. The name she gave me? Total fake. Nothing came up when they ran it. A couple days later, one of the officers called and said they got footage from the security cameras in the lobby. It showed her walking in, looking casual in a puffy coat and scarf. But right behind her, a guy followed in, also bundled up, hood pulled low. Neither of them looked up at the camera once. She walked straight to my unit, and he waited somewhere off camera. Later, both of them left with big tote bags. She even smiled at the front desk camera on the way out, like it was just another Tuesday. I'm not gonna lie, that part made my skin crawl. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't notice something was off. She was too friendly, too eager to get close, and she never talked much about herself. I just ignored all the little flags because she seemed sweet, and I was just happy to have made a new friend. Honestly, I still feel dumb. I just hope someday she slips up and gets caught. This happened maybe 2 years ago, and honestly, it's still one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. So I used to work in this massive office complex in downtown Elmsworth, mid-sized city, pretty industrial. The company I was with had what felt like thousands of employees, and the building itself had like 10 plus floors with all kinds of departments spread out. I was on the 6th floor, mostly sales and client relations, and while I knew most of the people on that floor, I rarely interacted with folks from other departments or levels. One Tuesday morning, I remember because I spilled coffee on my shoes like 5 minutes before. It was just me and this woman in the elevator. She struck up a convo, super casual. I don't remember specifics, but I do remember her saying she worked in the building, just on a different floor. She seemed upbeat, a little too bubbly. But hey, maybe she was just one of those coffee before work is life types. The next day, we walked into the building at the same time. She waved and we chatted again, this time a bit longer. From there, we started bumping into each other fairly often. Usually in the lobby, sometimes the 3rd floor lounge, or the cafeteria near the courtyard. We weren't tight or anything, but we'd chat maybe twice a week. Her name was... I think she told me it was Erica, or something along those lines. She was friendly, almost too friendly, like overly agreeable. No matter what I said, she'd nod along enthusiastically. Told her I hated the new vending machines. She hated them too. Ranted about how terrible parking was on Wednesdays. She had just been thinking the same thing. At first, I thought maybe we just had a lot in common, but after a while it felt off, like she was trying too hard. Still, I didn't give it much thought. The building was huge, kind of felt like a corporate campus more than an office. There were like 4 cafeterias, 2 rec rooms, and some random green spaces on different levels. It wasn't strange to meet new people even after months of working there. Then one Friday, my teammate Josh leaned over the divider and goes, "Hey, did you hear about the lady who got escorted out yesterday?" I had no clue what he was talking about. I assumed maybe someone got caught sleeping in the nap pod too long or whatever. But no, he meant Erica. Turns out, she didn't actually work there. Never had. Apparently, she'd been sneaking into the building almost every day for months, just wandering around like she belonged. I guess with how many people came and went, plus the fact that the entry scanners sometimes glitched, no one really noticed. She blended in just enough. Eventually, someone from HR spotted her and asked what department she was in, and she literally bolted, like sprinted down the hall. A few days later, she came back, again, and when someone confronted her that time, she wouldn't say her name or who she reported to. Security ended up calling the cops, and that was it. Banned from the building. After that, they tightened security a bit, added some extra badge scans and random ID checks. But man, I was shook. Like, I had actual convos with this person. She'd ask about my weekend plans, tell me about her project deadlines, all that. I still have no clue what she was doing there. Just hanging out? Looking for friends? Pretending to be part of the company for kicks? Anyway, haven't seen her since. Still low-key creeped out by it. This happened back when I was in high school, around the time I was a freshman, maybe 14 or 15. So, there was this new guy who showed up halfway through the year. I mean, we already had a batch of new faces at the start of the school year, and by the time winter rolled around, I had a pretty good idea of who was who. But then out of nowhere, during second semester, this other new dude shows up, which was kinda rare. Most transfers came earlier. Anyway, I had him in my second period Spanish class. I didn't know a single thing about him other than the fact that he clearly wasn't around first semester. One day after class, while we were all just milling around waiting for the bell to ring, He came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm Jordan." Real casual. We only talked for like a minute tops. Turns out he had moved from a town about 40 minutes out and had just transferred in. Said his family moved for his dad's job or something. He asked me my name, and that was pretty much it. A few days later, same scene. Waiting for the bell, not doing anything in particular, and we talked again. Still just small talk, nothing deep. But I noticed he always made a point to say hey whenever we passed each other in the halls. I'd do the same. He seemed pretty chill, just kind of quiet. Eventually, we got more comfortable talking during class downtime, especially if the teacher was late or something. He mentioned he lived in a neighborhood not too far from school, which I thought was funny because I hadn't seen him around before. We were basically school friends at that point. Never hung out outside class, never messaged each other or anything like that. Just those casual, consistent school conversations. Then this one thing happened that completely creeped me out. It was a random Wednesday night, probably mid-March. I remember because I had this super boring geometry test the next day, and I should have been asleep by like 10. But it was past 11, and I was just lying in bed, headphones on, scrolling TikTok or something dumb. Everyone else in the house was knocked out. Suddenly, I heard this noise from outside. At first, I thought it was just wind, or maybe one of the neighbor's cats knocking something over. Stuff like that wasn't too weird. But it kept going, and it wasn't the kind of sound you'd expect from an animal or wind hitting the trash cans. It was footsteps, slow, like someone walking. So I got up, pulled my curtain back a little, and peeked through the window. And there was definitely someone walking through our backyard. And at first, I thought I was just being paranoid or tired or something. But when I squinted and leaned in a little, I realized it was Jordan. Same black hoodie he always wore. Same way he kinda slouched when he walked. He wasn't looking at me, just casually strolling across our front lawn like it was totally normal. I only saw him for a few seconds before he disappeared off to the side, like he was heading toward the backyard. I just stood there for a second, frozen. I hadn't given him my address. Why would I? We weren't close like that. Didn't follow each other on anything, didn't have his number, never talked outside of school. I knew for a fact he didn't live in our area either. So why the hell was he here? I kept looking out the window, but he didn't come back into view. I started to feel weird, like that pit in your stomach kind of weird. So I left my room and crept down the hallway to the back of the house. The living room had a big window that faced the backyard, so I figured if he was still around, that'd be the place to check. It was dark, like no lights on in the whole house except for the faint glow of the microwave clock. Everyone else was asleep. I tiptoed across the room and pulled back one of the curtains just enough to see out. At first, I didn't see anything. I waited, probably stood there like an idiot for 3 minutes just staring into the night. Then I saw him again. Jordan was way out near the back fence, walking slowly like he was looking for something. His movements didn't make sense. He wasn't sneaking or running, just wandering. I watched him quietly, trying not to breathe too loud. After a few seconds, he passed behind this big oak tree we had and disappeared for a moment. Then, just as suddenly, he came back into view. But now he was walking directly toward the house. He was moving slow, steady, like he was deliberately heading straight to the window I was at. I ducked down a little, but not before he looked up. His head tilted, and I swear he stared right at me. He froze. Just stood there, maybe 30 feet from the window, not moving. I don't even think he could have seen me that clearly since the house was pitch dark, but something told me he knew I was watching. It was like this tense standoff for 5 or 6 seconds. Then he bolted. Didn't say anything, didn't make a noise, just turned around and sprinted back the way he came, through the side yard, and around the front. I ran to the kitchen window to catch another glimpse, but he was already gone. Next day, he wasn't in Spanish. Actually, he wasn't in school at all. At first I thought maybe he was sick or just ditched, but after that, nothing. He never came back. Over the next few weeks, I asked a few people if they'd seen him or knew what happened. Most didn't even remember who I was talking about. Oh, the new guy? Didn't he move again or something? Stuff like that. Apparently he was only there for like 6 weeks. To this day, I have no idea what he was doing at my place that night, or why he left school right after. I live in a pretty busy city, been here for a few years now, and for a good stretch back in late 2015, I had this routine where I'd go for a run before work every morning. Not like just before work, either. I mean, I was hitting the pavement by 5:45 a.m. and usually back at my apartment a little after 6:45. There's this massive park a few blocks from my old place in Eastwood Heights, and that was my go-to spot. Huge fields, winding paths, some sports courts, the whole deal. During the day it's packed. Dog walkers, old couples on strolls, teens messing around with soccer balls. But that early in the morning, practically deserted. Just a few other crazies like me out there. Most days I'd do my loop in the park, but I'd usually tack on a few blocks to the south or cut east down one of the quieter streets just to change things up. Nothing fancy. Anyway, one day I was wrapping up my jog and plopped down on one of those old wooden benches to reply to a text from my coworker about a broken coffee machine. Super urgent, obviously. While I'm sitting there catching my breath, this woman comes up jogging real slow, kind of like a cool down pace, and stops near me. She smiled and was like, "Hey, I see you running here a lot. Do you come around every morning?" I said yeah, pretty much, and we started chatting a little. She introduced herself as Lena, said she'd been running that park in the mornings too, just usually took a different route, so maybe that's why I hadn't noticed her before. To be honest, I probably wouldn't have recognized her even if we passed each other 10 times. I get tunnel vision when I run. I'm out there listening to music, focused on not dying before sunrise. But Lena seemed cool, friendly, definitely in better shape than me, which was a little humbling. After a few minutes, she suggested we run together sometime. I wasn't expecting that, but I figured why not. So we swapped numbers and made loose plans to meet up the next week. We actually did it too. Met up one morning, ran the usual loop, kept it casual. She had a better pace than I did, but didn't rub it in or anything. It went well. Nothing weird. Then, about a week after that, Lena texted me again. This time she asked if I wanted to go for a really early run with her. Like 4:30 a.m. early. I almost laughed out loud reading it. I mean, I'm a morning person, but even I don't get out of bed before 4 unless it's for an airport or an emergency. But she said she liked starting from a certain spot on the northwest end of the park, and that she'd found this new loop she was into lately. I figured it could be a fun change of pace, and I also didn't want to seem lame, so I told her I was down. Set my alarm for 4, dragged myself out of bed in total darkness, and headed out while the city was still completely asleep. When I got to the park, it was completely dead. I mean, yeah. What did I expect at 4:20 in the morning? The whole place was soaked in that eerie pre-dawn blue, and every sound felt like it echoed forever. I followed the route Lena had texted me, heading toward this trail loop she mentioned that started deeper in the wooded part of the park, past some thick trees and off the main path. I figured it was one of those hidden scenic routes or something. Felt kind of peaceful, if I'm being honest. I showed up about 5 minutes early. Figured maybe she'd already be stretching or running laps or whatever. But nope, no one was there. I stood around, Did a little pacing, checked my phone for the time, maybe replied to an email or two just to pass a minute. But I kept looking up, expecting to see her jog around the bend or wave me down. Still nothing. Then I heard footsteps. At first I assumed it was Lena finally showing up. I even smiled a little, ready to joke about how she owed me a coffee for dragging me out at such a cruel hour. But when I turned, it wasn't her. This dude was massive, easily over 6 feet, stocky as hell, and covered head to toe in black gear. Hoodie, gloves, pants, everything. He even had one of those thin, stretchy face masks that covered everything but his eyes. It wasn't a ski mask exactly, but definitely gave off, "This is not a friendly morning runner" energy. He was walking straight at me, no hesitation. My stomach dropped. Something about him just felt wrong. No phone, no water bottle, no earbuds. I turned casually like I was going to head back the way I came, trying not to freak out. But I could hear him speeding up. The crunch of his steps got faster and heavier. I didn't wait to find out what he wanted. I broke into a run, and sure enough, he started chasing me. I could actually hear how fast he was. Dude was not playing around. I tore down the trail toward the main path, trying to shout for help even though I knew nobody was around. I fumbled for the pepper spray I always carry in my hoodie pocket. I keep it on me for sketchy alleyways and night walks home, but this was the first time I'd ever actually reached for it mid-sprint. Pulling it out slowed me down just enough that he almost caught me. I felt his hand swipe at my arm, and I whipped around and sprayed like hell. Direct hit, right in the face. He staggered back immediately, hacking and yelling and pawing at his eyes. I got some of it too. My throat felt like I swallowed fire, but it stopped him cold. He lunged one more time, kind of blindly, but missed. I didn't wait to see if he'd recover. I booked it out of the trees, cut across the grass, and didn't stop running until I was halfway down Belmont Avenue. When I finally stumbled into my building and slammed the door shut, I was still in shock, heart going 1,000,000 miles an hour. For a few minutes I just sat there, thinking it had to be some random psycho. Just a mugging gone wrong or some sick creep lurking in the park. Then I remembered Lena. I pulled out my phone to text her. Wanted to tell her not to come, warn her about what just happened. But when I opened our chat, I couldn't. I was blocked. No messages, no last seen, just gone. And that's when it hit me. This whole thing wasn't random. She led me there. Set me up. I don't know who the guy was, or what exactly they were planning, but I know it wasn't a coincidence. After that? Yeah. I stopped running in that park. Honestly, I stopped running outdoors altogether for a while. Just didn't feel safe anymore. I was 17, still in high school, and desperate for attention online. Any kind of likes, comments, or reposts felt like some kind of proof that I existed. My best friend Josh had always been more ambitious. He talked all the time about going viral, building a YouTube channel, chasing clout like it was a job. One Friday night while we were sitting around his basement doing nothing, he said he had an idea for a video that would blow up for sure. Josh wanted us to sneak into an abandoned trailer park just outside of town. He swore it wasn't dangerous, said it had been empty for years. The city tried to clean it up once, but the project ran out of money. No cameras, no security. Just rows of old metal boxes and junk left to rot in the woods. I wasn't sold at first, but he kept showing me videos of other urban explorers racking up millions of views. He said all we had to do was run around, make dumb jokes, and maybe pretend we saw a raccoon or something. I told him I wasn't trying to get arrested. He laughed and said no one cared what happened out there. I gave in. I went home and pulled an old flashlight from my dad's garage and a beat-up Sony camcorder we used to use on vacations. It still worked, sort of. I charged it enough to maybe get an hour of footage. Josh pulled up outside my house at 9:30 p.m. in his dented gray Honda Civic. The passenger door creaked when I opened it. He had that energy about him, like he was already in the video, talking into an imaginary mic. The drive was maybe 15 minutes. Once we passed the last gas station, it got real quiet. Just trees and cracked road. No lights, no other cars. Josh killed the headlights when we turned down the dirt path, said we didn't want anyone spotting us. His phone was already set to record when we parked. We climbed out and walked toward the chain link fence. It was bent inward at the top, rusted all the way through. Someone had tried to cut a hole in the side years ago. Josh didn't hesitate. He tossed his backpack through first, then climbed the fence like it was nothing. I followed, slower. My jacket caught on one of the sharp ends, and I had to yank it loose. I felt a cold breeze once I was over, smelled wet dirt and something faintly chemical. Maybe old gas or mold. We stood there for a second, just inside the fence. Ahead of us, a dozen trailers sat in uneven rows. Most were sun-faded, with busted windows and collapsed awnings. One had its door ripped off completely. The flashlight flickered when I clicked it on, but it held. Josh handed me his phone. "You film. I'll do the stupid stuff." Then he started running between the trailers, laughing like a maniac. He slapped one of the metal doors and yelled, "Hey, anyone home?" The sound echoed off the hollow walls. I kept the camera pointed at him, but I noticed he was moving weird, doubling back, stalling a little, like he was making sure I didn't get ahead of him. I thought maybe he had a bit planned or was going to try to scare me for extra views. Then he stopped and turned back toward me. "Dude," he whispered, "I hear footsteps." His voice was low, but serious. I paused the camera and looked around. There was no one, no cars, no lights, just shadows and peeling paint. I asked, "Where?" He pointed toward the far end, near a trailer with a collapsed roof. "There, I swear." I listened, but heard nothing. I told him it was probably an animal, or maybe the wind. He nodded, but didn't say anything else, just kept glancing over his shoulder. I figured he was building tension for the video, trying to fake some ghost hunter energy. I didn't feel scared, just annoyed. We kept walking deeper into the lot. I stepped over a broken chair frame, and something slipped out of my hoodie pocket. I heard it hit the ground and clatter. My phone. I pointed the flashlight down and tried to spot it, but the beam was weak and the ground was covered in weeds and old debris. "Hey, shine your light over here," I said. No answer. I looked up. Josh had already turned the corner between two trailers. I heard him laughing again, but it was farther away. "Josh?" I called out. The laugh faded. I crouched down, sweeping the flashlight slowly, trying not to panic. The weeds rustled as I moved them aside, but the phone was gone. I stood back up. Still no sign of Josh. I took a few steps toward where he had gone and called again, louder. Nothing. I turned the flashlight to full power and walked around the trailer corner. The space behind the trailer was dark, boxed in by another unit and a stack of broken wooden pallets. The flashlight bounced off the side wall. Empty space. Josh wasn't there. I walked farther, holding the camera tight. Still no sound, no laughter, just silence and the crackling of old dry leaves under my boots. I tried calling his name one more time. No answer. I called his name again, louder this time. The echo bounced between the metal shells of the trailers, thin and sharp like it was getting thrown back at me from every direction. Still nothing. Not even footsteps. I turned in a slow circle, trying to figure out which way he went. My breath sounded too loud in my ears, like it didn't belong in this place. I turned back the way we came, heading toward the fence. When I got there, I stopped cold. The gate was shut. A heavy chain was looped around it, and a padlock hung from the middle. I hadn't seen it before. We'd climbed through the bent part of the fence, and it had been wide open. Now it was closed tight. I yanked on it, but it didn't move. I looked around for another gap, something I could fit through. Nothing but twisted metal and overgrown bushes. I reached into my pocket for my car keys and felt nothing. I checked the other one, then the side pocket of my hoodie. Empty. That was when it hit me. Josh had them. I'd handed them to him earlier when we parked. Said I didn't want them falling out while we filmed. My stomach dropped. My flashlight was flickering at the edges, and the camera screen flashed a low battery warning in red. I turned it off to save power. I stood there for a minute, listening. The wind had picked up a little, rustling the trees, but the trailers were dead quiet. I kept thinking about how Josh had said he heard footsteps. Maybe there were squatters. Or maybe the floor in one of these things had collapsed, and he'd fallen in. I started to worry that maybe something really had happened. I jogged back into the rows, shining the flashlight through broken windows and half-open doors. I found a trailer that looked empty and tried the door, but it was stuck tight. I kicked at it once, then twice, but it didn't budge. I backed up and hit it with my shoulder. Nothing. The panic was crawling up now, tight in my chest. I kept turning the flashlight off between bursts to save power, but every time I turned it on again, the light was dimmer. A sharp clatter rang out behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. Then I heard steps. Quick ones, maybe 20 feet away. I took off, bolting between the trailers, brushing past metal handrails that bent under my weight. I slipped on some wet leaves and caught myself on the corner of a unit. My flashlight bounced once on the ground before I grabbed it again. Another bang rang out behind me. Something big, like someone throwing a pipe onto the pavement. I turned hard and ran toward one of the trailers we hadn't gone near yet. I remembered seeing a window that was already cracked. I aimed for it, the light barely helping now. When I got there, I lifted my leg and kicked. The glass gave way on the third try, scattering into the dirt. I threw my flashlight inside and climbed in after it. As soon as I put my weight down, the floor gave out under me. My right leg sank straight through, down to the knee. Something sharp tore into my shin, and I gasped. I pulled myself up and out, dragging my leg free. Blood smeared across the rotted floor. I stayed crouched, breathing hard, listening for more footsteps. Then a bright light filled the trailer from outside. Red and blue flashes blinked on the walls. Headlights blasted through the busted window. A voice yelled, "Stay where you are!" I froze. The flashlight rolled off my knee and clattered against the floor again. "Out! Come out now!" the voice said. It was a cop. I didn't move for a second, then half-crawled toward the window, trying not to put pressure on my leg. I pushed myself up and tumbled out into the dirt, landing hard. The officer grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. My whole body was shaking, but not from the cold. He walked me out to the road where his cruiser was parked. My leg burned with every step, and I tried not to limp too much. When we got there, I saw Josh's Civic. The door was open. Josh was sitting inside with the camera on his lap, grinning like a kid who just pulled off the best prank in the world. The officer asked him what was going on. Josh started laughing and said, "We were just filming a reaction video. I wanted to test his nerves. You should have seen his face." He held up the camera. "Got the whole thing." I didn't say anything. I just walked over and snatched the flash drive out of the side of the camcorder. He tried to stop me, but I stared him down. He shrugged and said, "Too late, bro. Already uploaded it." Back at home, I watched the clip once. It showed me stumbling through the trailers, calling for him, shining my light like a scared animal. The comments were already filling up, people laughing, saying I was soft, that it was just a prank. None of them saw the rusted floorboard or the blood on my jeans. None of them knew how close I came to snapping my leg or falling deeper. I blocked Josh that night, reported the video, and filed a police report for theft and endangerment. We never spoke again. Now, every time someone suggests something for content, I ask myself, who's gonna bleed if it goes wrong? A year ago, during finals week, my friend Ben lost his apartment. He didn't have anywhere to go, and I had a couch in my room that wasn't being used. It seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time. He'd been a decent guy, quiet, didn't cause problems, and we'd known each other for a while. So I said he could crash for a couple of weeks, just until he figured something out. He showed up the next day with a duffel bag and a beat-up backpack. At first, things were fine. He helped cook dinner a few nights, filled up my gas tank once when I drove him to a job interview. Nothing major, just little gestures that made it seem like he appreciated the favor. My girlfriend Taylor was around a lot too. We'd been studying together almost every day in my room, and sometimes she'd stay late if we got deep into work. Ben would hang around sometimes, just watching something on his laptop with headphones in. He'd occasionally crack jokes about how we looked too cute to function when we sat close together. Taylor rolled her eyes, I laughed, and it all felt harmless. In the evenings, when none of us had much going on, we'd end up watching a couple of shows together. We got through most of a detective series in a week. Ben would usually sit in the armchair, and Taylor and I were on my bed, leaning against the wall. Sometimes Ben added a few comments about the show, nothing weird. He was quiet most of the time. He didn't try to insert himself into things, just existed in the background. I didn't think twice about it. I was so focused on my exams that I barely noticed the subtle changes at first. It was Taylor who started picking up on it. A week after Ben moved in, he switched the tea he drank. Used to be some basic lemon stuff. Now it was this weird herbal blend Taylor always made. Chamomile with mint. When she mentioned it, I said it was probably nothing. Maybe he liked the taste. Then he started wearing a t-shirt that looked almost identical to one Taylor had. Gray, small red lettering across the chest. Same fabric. Hers said Wesley Hall Rowing, and his said Franklin Crew, but it had the same shape and shade. Taylor made a face when she noticed, but she didn't say anything directly to him. She brought it up to me later, and I shrugged it off. He probably just had it already. People have similar shirts. Nothing to make a big deal about. That Friday night, Taylor stayed over until about midnight. We had a long study session, got takeout, and ended up passing out for a bit on the couch while some documentary played. When she left, I walked her down to the parking lot. Ben was already in bed when I came back. Next morning, Taylor texted me something strange. Her toothbrush felt wet when she picked it up that morning. She said she didn't use it, just noticed and thought maybe I bumped it when I grabbed mine. I told her I hadn't. She dropped it after that, didn't make a big deal. But I still went out and bought a new one for her later that day, just to be safe. Figured maybe something spilled in the cup, or it was just humidity. That's what I told myself. A couple of days later, another small thing. Taylor came over to shower before her class, which she did sometimes since my place was closer to campus. After she left, she texted again. asked if I'd used the towel hanging on the door in the bathroom. I hadn't. I always used my own from the shelf. She said it was damp, not soaking, but like it had been used and rehung. She was weirded out. I didn't know what to say. Told her I'd check. Maybe it was a plumbing thing. Maybe the steam just settled weird. But I started getting uneasy. I remembered then that I had installed a small security camera above the hallway door last winter after someone tried to break into the building. It was motion activated, not great resolution, but it recorded snippets when there was movement in the hallway outside my room and the shared bathroom. I hadn't looked at it in months. I opened the app and scrolled through the recordings. Most were just clips of me, or Taylor coming and going, or Ben moving around during the day. Then I saw a clip from 2 nights ago. The timestamp said 12:43 a.m. The clip was only 14 seconds. It showed Ben standing outside the door to the bathroom. He wasn't moving, just standing there, arms by his sides. He stayed like that for about 10 seconds, then leaned slightly toward the door like he was listening. He didn't go in, just stood there, then turned and walked away. I played it again. Same thing. He was barefoot. His shoulders were stiff, like he was tense. He didn't knock or speak or do anything else. I kept scrolling and found another from the same night, an hour later. This time he was outside my room. Taylor had still been there earlier. He stood by the door, same posture, just standing there. No reason for it. He didn't go in, just waited, motionless, then left again after 15 seconds. I didn't know what to do. I didn't say anything to him right away. That night, I left the phone recording when I went to sleep, just to see if anything else would happen. The next afternoon, I waited until Taylor left and Ben was back from a walk to sit him down. I didn't want to accuse him outright without giving him a chance to explain, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat anything either. I told him straight. I'd seen the footage. I knew he'd been hovering near the bathroom and our door late at night. I said it made Taylor uncomfortable, and I wanted to understand what he was doing. He scoffed and leaned back on the couch like it was some joke. Called me jealous. "You're reading too much into this, man. She's pretty. You're protective. I get it." But his eyes weren't meeting mine. They kept flicking to the hallway behind me, like he wasn't really listening. There was no guilt, no apology, just annoyance, like I was bothering him. That night I set up another camera, this one in the living room, angled toward the couch and entry to the hallway. I didn't tell him. The next morning, before I even brushed my teeth, I opened the app and went straight to the feed. There was a clip from 2:27 a.m. In it, Ben stood in the dark living room. He walked over to the couch where Taylor had been sitting earlier in the day. Slowly, deliberately, he bent over the throw pillow she always used. Then he pressed his face into it. Not just resting there, he was licking it. Long, slow swipes. His hands gripped the sides like he was trying to squeeze the scent out of it. I closed the phone and sat in silence for a minute. The disgust didn't hit all at once. It crept up, like nausea. Taylor came in an hour later. I didn't say anything right away, just handed her the phone. She watched the clip in full silence, then set it down. Her face was tight. No yelling, no dramatic reaction, just pure, frozen revulsion. That afternoon, I printed out a few stills, the frame where his tongue was out, another where his hands were clutching the fabric. I laid them on the kitchen table, no explanation, just the images. Then I wrote on a sticky note, "You're leaving today." He came back an hour later with a pizza box and a stupid grin, like everything was fine. He walked into the kitchen, saw the prints, and stopped. The grin dropped. What the fuck is this? I didn't move. We're done. Pack your shit. You're out today. He stared at the photos, then up at me. His face darkened, lips twitching. This is insane. You think I'm a threat? After everything I did for you? I bought groceries. I helped you with your damn essays. His voice cracked, then got loud. I should have known you'd turn on me. You always had that look, like you were better than me. I stepped back and pulled out my phone, called our neighbor, Mike, who lived down the hall and worked as a local cop. I kept my eyes on Ben while it rang. Ben saw what I was doing and snapped. He grabbed the photos and tore them in half, then again and again, shouting, "This is fake. You think this proves anything? You edited this. You twisted it." When the knock on the door came, just 2 solid thumps, he froze. Eyes darted to the hallway. Then, like a switch flipped, he bolted to the bedroom, yanking open drawers and stuffing his bag. Taylor and I stood in the kitchen, dead still, listening as he moved around like a storm, cursing under his breath. Then came the slam of the front door. Silence settled. We didn't speak for a full minute. The next day, we changed the locks. I contacted the landlord and explained the situation. He understood. Taylor blocked Ben on everything. I deleted him from my contacts, social, email, everywhere. But we kept the cameras. I upgraded them, actually. Set them to record 24/7 with cloud backup. Even now, sometimes I wake up thinking I heard footsteps in the hallway. I check the feed. Usually it's nothing. Just the wind rattling something. Or maybe I imagined it. Doesn't matter. I'll never let my guard down again. I learned that offering someone a couch doesn't mean they're your friend. Being helpful, friendly, even quiet, doesn't mean they're safe. Friendship without boundaries turns fast into invasion. A home isn't a shelter for other people's obsessions. It's the one place that should always be yours. I don't forget that anymore. The 4th of July always brings our family together. That year, I decided to host the barbecue at my parents' house. We had the space, the big old grill still worked, and my folks liked having everyone around. I sent out the usual group texts to uncles, cousins, siblings. Everyone said they'd come, and by noon, the yard was already filling up with folding chairs, ice chests, and paper plates weighed down with hot dogs and potato salad. Leo, a guy I used to know from college, messaged me that morning. He said he was in town for the weekend and asked if he could swing by. We hadn't talked in maybe 3 years, but he was always easy to be around. Said he'd bring chips and soda. I figured why not? More hands to flip burgers. I told him the address and said we'd be outside most of the day. He replied with a thumbs up. By the time Leo arrived, most people were already settled in. Kids were running around with sparklers. My Uncle Jimmy was nursing a beer on the porch, and my dad was trying to fix the Bluetooth speaker. Leo walked up the driveway with a backpack slung over one shoulder, waving like he'd never been gone. He gave me a quick hug and said, "You're gonna love what I brought. Got a little something for a special show later." I thought he meant fireworks. He pulled out a big bag of chips and a couple bottles of soda, like he said he would. But then he unzipped a side pocket and took out a small glass bottle filled with these bright-colored tablets, blue, red, yellow. It looked like candy at first. He held it up and smiled. "Just some adult vitamins," he said, with this grin like it was a private joke. "For later, you know, after the kids go to bed." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and turned back toward the grill. I figured I'd talk to him about it later, once everyone had eaten. He slipped the bottle into his jeans pocket and wandered off, chatting with my cousin Mark about something. Food was moving fast. People kept coming back for seconds. The grill was hot, and I stayed busy flipping burgers and cutting sausages. My sister was handing out soda cans. A couple of the little ones were lighting sparklers too close to the dry patch of grass, so I had to keep yelling at them to move back. An hour passed. The sun dipped a little, and the shade from the porch stretched across the yard. My aunt set up a folding table with desserts, and someone finally got the speaker working. Kids were dancing on the patio, still holding the burned-out ends of their sparklers. It felt like any other 4th of July. Then I heard something. This short gasp, like someone trying to catch their breath too fast. I turned and saw my cousin Eddie stumbling near the steps by the porch. At first, I thought he tripped. But then he just dropped. I ran over. He was on his side, curled up. His face was pale, skin almost gray. He was breathing, but shallow, like every breath cost him something. My aunt was already kneeling beside him, shaking his shoulders, calling his name. People crowded around. My mom screamed to call an ambulance. While we were trying to keep Eddie conscious, Leo was just gone. Nobody saw him leave. I ran back toward the side yard where he'd been earlier, thinking maybe he went to get help or something. But his backpack was still there, half-zipped, left under the oak tree near the fence. I opened it and started looking through the pockets. Inside, there was a small Ziploc bag with a bottle of the same liquid I saw in his vape earlier. Light pink, kind of oily, with no label. The paramedics were already checking Eddie's vitals. One of them asked if we'd seen him take anything, and I showed them the bottle. He didn't even blink, just nodded like he'd seen it before. Possible overdose, he said. Looks like a designer stimulant. We've been seeing this stuff a lot lately. They packed Eddie onto the stretcher and rolled him out to the ambulance. My mom was crying, holding his shoe in her hands like it meant something. I called Leo right there, still holding the bottle. My hands were shaking. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was calm, almost bored. I told him what happened, told him Eddie was in the hospital. He didn't ask if Eddie was okay. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said. "You can't prove anything. There's nothing in that bottle with my name on it." That sentence hit harder than anything. Like he'd rehearsed it. Like he expected this. I didn't even respond. I just ended the call and stared at the phone. The whole party had gone quiet by then. Kids were inside. Grown-ups were whispering. The sky was full dark, but nobody lit fireworks. The police showed up just after midnight, outside the hospital. They took my statement right in the hallway outside Eddie's room. I gave them Leo's full name, the bottle, the vape, everything I remembered. One of the officers took the backpack into evidence. They were both polite, but you could tell this wasn't new to them. I tried to sleep that night, but my phone kept lighting up with nothing. Every time I heard a car pass outside, I flinched. I kept picturing Leo standing in the yard again, holding that bottle, smirking. His social media accounts were already gone, wiped clean. The photos, the posts, even his name on old group tags had disappeared. An officer called me the next morning, said the address Leo gave at the party had been vacant for over a month. The lease ended suddenly. No forwarding info. No one had seen him since the night of the barbecue. That's when I realized Leo wasn't just missing. He was never really here. I'd been friends with a ghost in real time. Eddie pulled through, but it was close. The doctor said he was lucky. Whatever was in his system, it messed with his heart rate and his lungs. He still goes for testing twice a month. Can't do sports, can't drink coffee. His mom watches him like a hawk now. The rest of the family hasn't really looked at me the same. I know it's not fair, but I brought Leo. I opened the gate. My aunt never said anything outright, but her eyes say enough. Like I left the door open and let something bad inside. A week later, I wrote a message and sent it to everyone in the family group chat. It said, "From now on, no unsealed bottles or containers at gatherings. If you bring something, we want to see the label. No exceptions." Nobody argued. Nobody replied. But I know they read it. We still celebrate the holidays, but quieter now. No big cookouts, no surprise guests, just close family. A few sparklers, some music, and everyone home before dark. No one talks about Leo. No one asks if we've heard from him. I haven't. And if he ever does show up again, it won't be to me. I'd rather have silence than another emergency room. It happened last spring, right after I finished my internship. I was still adjusting to a new routine, kind of burnt out, still half stuck in that mindset of waking up too early, staring at screens too long, forgetting meals. That's when Matt showed up again. We'd been close in high school but hadn't really kept in touch since graduation. He messaged me out of nowhere, saying he was back in town. When we met, he looked the same but different. More intense. His eyes didn't really rest on anything for long, and every time we talked, he brought up this thing he called his inner light. He'd say stuff like, "Once you start seeing the light, you can't go back," or, "Most people walk around asleep, but I'm done with that." I didn't argue, just nodded, smiled, tried not to look uncomfortable. He'd always been a little eccentric, but now it felt practiced, like he was performing calmness. Still, he was friendly, and I didn't have many people around after the internship ended. So when he invited me to spend a weekend at some wellness retreat in the desert, I hesitated, but not for long. He said it was out by an old dry lake bed, good for unplugging. "Just a couple days," he told me, "and it'll change the way you think. You need this." I said yes, mostly because I didn't want to offend him. We left Friday afternoon. The drive took almost 6 hours. The highway faded into gravel roads with no signage. I kept checking the GPS, but the signal dropped about 30 minutes from the destination. The landscape outside the window turned pale, cracked, sunburnt. Not a single building in sight for miles. When we finally arrived, it wasn't what I expected. Not a cabin, not a spa, just an old, windowless motel with fading paint and no name. The parking lot was empty except for 3 cars, all parked facing the same way. There was no front desk, no lobby, just a single door with chipped red paint and a bell tied to the knob with string. 3 people came out to meet us. They wore matching gray tank tops and loose pants, barefoot despite the gravel. All of them smiled, but it didn't feel friendly. More like they were waiting. One woman stepped forward and hugged Matt without a word. He hugged her back like they'd known each other for years. Then he turned to me and said, "This is where it starts. Just trust the process." Inside, it smelled like dust and vinegar. The floor creaked, and the lights flickered slightly, like they were hooked up to a weak generator. My room was at the end of the hallway, small, with a thin mattress on a wooden frame. No decorations, no clock, and no lock on the door. There wasn't even a hook for a towel. I placed my backpack on the bed and sat down, trying not to look nervous. Matt came by and said, "Session starts in 5. We gathered in a larger room at the back. There were maybe 10 other people, sitting on the floor in a circle. Matt sat down easily, cross-legged, closing his eyes. I followed his lead, more out of confusion than comfort. Then the singing started. Low, monotone chants in a language I didn't recognize. They swayed slowly, breathing in sync. It felt like being underwater, like sound moved differently in there. At first, I assumed it was some kind of meditation exercise, but it didn't stop. They just kept going, for what felt like 40 minutes. No one explained anything. My legs started to cramp. I shifted position a few times, got some looks. When the chanting finally ended, nobody clapped or spoke. They just got up and left the room silently. Matt smiled at me, whispered, "You'll get used to it," and walked out. Dinner was beans and boiled rice served in dented metal bowls. Everyone sat outside on a long wooden bench near a fire pit. I tried to make small talk with the woman next to me, but she just stared ahead like I hadn't said anything. One of the men across the table raised his bowl and said, "To the guest, may her old skin fall clean." A few of them chuckled. I forced a smile, not sure what to say. Maybe it was some kind of in-joke. When the meal was over, no one lingered. Everyone got up in sync, like they were following a signal. I headed back to my room. Matt was nowhere to be seen. The hallway was dim, with only one bulb lighting the whole stretch. I went into my room and closed the door behind me. There was no way to lock it. I checked twice. The knob just turned in both directions. No latch, no bolt. I sat on the bed and pulled my backpack into my lap, zipping it up tight and wrapping my arms around it. The whisper at the door cut through the silence like a blade. I'd barely fallen asleep, still clutching my backpack, when I heard it. Low, hurried, like someone chanting just below breath. I didn't move at first. I just listened. Then came the creak. The door opened slowly, and Matt stepped in, followed by 4 others in the same gray clothes. One of them held a cloth sack, the kind you'd carry potatoes in. Matt crouched by the bed and said, "Trust. This is part of the path." I stood up fast, grabbing the strap of my backpack. He reached toward me like he was calming a frightened animal. "It's okay. You don't have to be afraid." But the others were closing in already. 2 of them moved to block the door. Another stood near the window. One stepped forward and reached for my arm. My heartbeat surged so fast it felt like a siren inside my head. I screamed, a short, sharp sound, and swung my hand at the closest one. My nails scraped down his cheek, drawing a sudden dark line. He yelped, more surprised than hurt. That half-second was enough. I lunged for the window, drove my shoulder into it with everything I had. The glass cracked but didn't give. I hit it again. This time it shattered outward. Cold night air hit my face. I dove through, not caring about the shards slicing at my skin. My feet hit the sand hard. I ran. The sand was rough and full of sharp little stones. I had no shoes, barely any clothes that could protect me. Each step burned. I didn't turn around, just ran, straight across the dark open desert, toward the only thing I could hope to find, a road. I don't know how long I ran. Time blurred. My legs went from burning to numb. The sky was black but full of stars. Eventually, I saw headlights. Distant, barely there, but enough to pull me forward. I reached the roadside just as a car passed. I waved, jumped, screamed. It didn't stop. Another one passed minutes later. No reaction. On the 3rd try, a pickup truck slowed, brakes screeching softly as it came to a stop a few yards ahead. The driver leaned out, cautious. "You okay?" he asked. Then he saw the blood on my arms and legs, the dirt, the broken glass stuck in my shoulder. He opened the passenger door without another word. I climbed in, shivering now that the adrenaline was fading. "There's a sheriff's station 20 miles down," he said, already turning the wheel. I didn't say much during the drive. He asked what happened, and I gave him pieces. Motel, people, no names, just enough. At the station, I told the officer what I could remember. Coordinates, road turns, the weird session, the chanting, Matt. I gave them everything I had. By morning, a small team went out to check the place. I waited, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, drinking bad coffee. When they came back, the officer didn't say much. Just that the site was empty. The fire pit was still warm, so they couldn't have been gone long. Tracks in the sand showed at least 2 vehicles had left recently. No sign of the people. No records of the property being active. No identification. Matt never came home. It's been almost a year. I still live in the same apartment, but I keep the curtains shut all day. I check the locks twice every night. Sometimes I leave a light on. I changed my number after the 5th unknown caller that hung up after 1 ring. I've thought a lot about Matt, about how we sat together in the cafeteria in 11th grade, how he helped me move into my first dorm. For a while, I kept thinking he'd come back, that he'd knock on my door and explain it all. But he hasn't. And the truth is, I don't think he ever will. What scares me the most is how normal it all felt, right up until it wasn't. How easily I ignored the signs. Because it was Matt. Because I thought I knew him. I thought loyalty was the right thing. But the truth is, even a familiar face can lead you into a trap. All it takes is not asking questions. Trust without checking. That's the fastest way into something you can't walk out of. Last fall, I had been dating Jen for about a year. We weren't flashy or anything, but we got along well. We lived together in a small 1-bedroom apartment just off 8th Street, not far from where I worked at the repair shop. Things were steady. Not perfect, but good. My old buddy Ryan started coming over more around that time. We'd known each other since we were kids, played on the same soccer team back in middle school. He worked late shifts at the distribution center, so he'd often stop by our place after I finished at the shop. He'd bring beer sometimes, or sandwiches. It became a bit of a routine. He'd crack jokes about me and Jen being that couple from the insurance ads. It didn't bother me. I figured he was just being friendly, trying to fit in. Jen liked him. She laughed at his dumb puns, and he'd help her with little stuff like fixing the broken closet hinge. She said it was nice having someone around who wasn't glued to their phone all day. I didn't see a problem with it. One time when I had to cover a shift last minute, Ryan swung by with coffee for both of us. Jen texted me a pic of the cups with a heart emoji. I thought it was thoughtful, just something a good friend would do. The 3 of us even started talking about going hiking in November. Jen found a trail out by Clearwater Ridge. We picked out a weekend, but Ryan said he couldn't get those dates off. We shuffled things around a few times, but the trip never ended up happening. No one made a big deal of it. It just sort of faded out. Everything still felt normal. Then, about a month later, Ryan came by one evening with something in a small box. It wasn't wrapped, just plain cardboard with the top folded in. Jen and I were sitting on the couch watching some cooking show. He handed it to her without much ceremony. She opened it, and inside was a bracelet, thin, gold-colored, with an engraving on the inside. "Be brave." She looked at him and asked, "What's this for?" He shrugged and said, "Sorry about bailing on the hike. Thought I'd make it up to you." I looked at him. I didn't say anything at first. Jen turned the bracelet in her hand. She said, "It's really nice, but it's too much. I don't want you spending money like that on me." He waved her off, said it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't expensive, just a thing I saw that reminded me of you. Something in my stomach tightened. I didn't want to make a scene, so I waited until Jen went to the kitchen. I pulled Ryan aside. "Hey man, I appreciate the thought, but maybe cool it a bit with the gifts, yeah?" He looked at me like I was joking. Then he smirked. "Dude, you're being sensitive." He tapped me on the shoulder like he always did back in high school. "It's just a bracelet." I didn't laugh. I told him again, firm this time. Back off a bit. Seriously. He didn't argue, just gave me that same little smirk. Then he walked over to the shelf by the TV, took the bracelet from Jen's hand and said, "All right, whatever. I'll just leave it here." He placed it on the edge of the top shelf, near the plant pot, then turned and walked out without another word. That Friday evening, I had to stay late at the shop. One of the ice machines broke down, and the owner didn't want to leave it overnight. I was elbow deep in tools when my phone started buzzing. I ignored it at first, but it rang again. Same number. Jen. I wiped my hands and picked up. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "He's here," she said. "Ryan. He just showed up. He's acting weird." I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and left everything. Didn't even clock out. The streets felt slower than usual, traffic lights longer. When I got to our building, the elevator felt like it was moving through molasses. Every floor ding dragged. On our floor, I stepped into the hallway and froze. I could hear crying. Jen. Her voice carried through the cracked open door. I pushed it open. The lights were low. Jen stood near the window, her arms pulled forward like she was trying to get away. But Ryan was gripping her wrists. He kept saying over and over, "Just listen. Just give us a chance. Real love doesn't wait forever." I didn't stop to think. I ran across the room and grabbed him by the shoulders, yanking him away from her. He spun around fast and drove his elbow into my chest, catching me under the ribs. I stumbled back. He screamed something. His face was red, spit at the corners of his mouth. "You stole her! You stole my life!" I backed up, reached for the kitchen stool near the counter and held it between us like a shield. He didn't charge again, but he paced, eyes wild, breathing fast. Jen had backed into the hallway. From the hallway came another door opening. Our neighbor, an older woman named Carla. She'd heard the noise. I heard her voice, calling the police. Seconds stretched. Ryan kept pacing, fists clenched, but he didn't leave. He looked toward the door like he wanted to bolt but couldn't move. Then we all heard it. The distant wail of sirens. They grew louder, fast. Ryan finally stopped. His shoulders sagged. He let out this guttural sound, somewhere between a sigh and a sob, then dropped his arms. The officers came in just as he stepped toward the door. Guns weren't drawn, but they moved with purpose. Two of them pinned him against the wall. He didn't fight. One held his arm while the other cuffed him. Jen didn't speak. I stood still with the stool in my hands until they took him out. The court issued a restraining order. Ryan wasn't allowed within 200 yards of us. He didn't try to contest it. Jen packed a few bags and went to stay with her sister for a while. She needed space, and I understood. I spent that weekend changing the locks. Took down the photos in the hallway, the ones from years back, me, Jen, and Ryan at the lake, all smiles. I couldn't look at them anymore. I cleaned the shelf near the TV where that bracelet had sat for weeks. I threw it in a drawer and slammed it shut. People talk a lot about red flags in hindsight, how easy it is to see them once you know the outcome. But the truth is, when you've known someone since you were kids, you give them room. You trust your own history. I shouldn't have. Friendship doesn't excuse ignoring warning signs. It doesn't justify brushing off small things that don't sit right. Because if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, eventually, they'll break them. When I was 20, Mike was like the engine of every crazy thing we did. He wasn't just fun, he pushed things. We skateboarded down hills with no brakes, jumped off that rusted-out bridge into the river below, raced dirt bikes in the dark without helmets. I lived like every warning was just someone else's fear. Mike had this thing he always said, "Fear is a jail for the weak." I'd laugh and nod like it was gospel. We thought we were untouchable, free, or at least something close to it. Most days we didn't plan much. Wake up, get food, ride somewhere, see who else was around. That summer, we hung out mostly near the auto shop where Mike worked part-time. It smelled like old oil and cigarette smoke. The guys there let us hang around if we didn't get in the way. Mike loved that place. Said he learned more in the garage than he ever did in class. He'd wipe his hands with a rag, leave grease on the steering wheel, and tear through back roads like he had nothing to lose. I didn't even have a car back then, so I just tagged along. Evenings, we'd meet up with guys like Troy and Kev, drink behind the baseball field or by the construction site down on Kennedy. Nobody really checked on us. We weren't doing anything too loud or too stupid. Not usually. Just beers, music from someone's phone, sometimes a joint. Mike always had a story, and somehow it always ended with somebody bleeding or laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. I had a big test coming up that week, one of the ones that counted. I was trying to switch programs, and passing that exam was part of it. I stayed in that night to study, even turned my phone off. But around midnight, I saw my bedroom window light up with a pair of headlights. I knew it was Mike. I went downstairs barefoot, book still open on the table. He was leaning against the hood of his car, a beat-up red Charger that growled even when it was parked. He already had a beer in hand. He saw me and shouted, "Come on, man, you're gonna rot in there." I told him I had to study, had to be up in 6 hours. He just raised his eyebrows, like he didn't understand the words. "We're just going to breathe a little. You look like you've been buried alive." He opened the passenger door, didn't even wait for me to answer. The interior smelled like hot plastic and gasoline. I caught a glimpse of Troy in the back seat, half asleep, or maybe already drunk. Some girl I didn't know was in there too, face lit by her phone. Mike tossed his beer aside and slid into the driver's seat. The way he looked at me, I knew he wasn't leaving without me. I gave in. I always did. I walked around the front and got in. First thing I noticed were his keys already in the ignition. That weird skull keychain he had was swinging back and forth. I reached for them and said, "I'll drive." Just like that. Calm. Clear. I wasn't joking. He laughed like I'd just told him the dumbest joke in the world. "Then what's the point?" he said, grabbing the keys back. "You gonna crawl through the night at 40 like a grandpa?" "I'm serious," I said. "You're drunk." "And you're scared," he shot back. "Which one of us is worse?" I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He stared back. Then he reached over and shoved me lightly. "Relax, man. You think I'd let us crash? I got this. I'm solid." His smile was too wide, like he was proving something. I hesitated, then closed the door and buckled up. I never used seatbelts back then, but something made me do it. I clicked it in before he even turned the key. The engine roared like a beast waking up. The girl in the back let out a little cheer. Mike revved it a few times, then peeled out, tires screeching as we flew down my quiet street. I saw one of my neighbors peeking out through their blinds. We hit the main road and the speedometer climbed fast, 60, 70, then past 100. Houses blurred into shadows. The wind screamed through the cracked window. Mike whooped once and pounded the steering wheel. I told him to slow down. He didn't respond, just kept driving, face lit up like it was Christmas. The lines on the road came faster and faster. I gripped the door with one hand, the dashboard with the other. Mike took a turn without braking, the tires thudding over the edge of the curb, then slamming back onto the road. Something behind us clattered to the floor. Maybe a bottle. I looked over and saw his eyes. They were wide open, but glassy, focused on the road like he could will it to stay smooth. We passed a gas station, then a closed diner. Everything looked frozen, except us. He pushed it harder. The needle passed 110. The highway stretched empty ahead, nothing but blacktop and distant red lights blinking on some radio tower. I saw the warning sign flash by. White triangle, slick road symbol. There must have been a leak or oil from trucks, or maybe just worn asphalt. Either way, it meant slow down. Mike did the opposite. He floored it again, pedal hitting metal with a thud I felt in my gut. The rear wheels twitched, then lost grip. The back end swung left like it had a mind of its own. We skidded across both lanes. I shouted, "Brake!" He yelled, "Hold on!" and yanked the wheel too hard the other way. The tires screamed as we spun sideways. I saw a blur of grass, black sky, headlights swinging past trees. Then came the crunch. A deep, horrible grind of metal meeting something that didn't give. The passenger side slammed down into a ditch. My shoulder hit the door. Then the airbag exploded in my face like a punch from nowhere. My head snapped back. Everything stopped with a final lurch. Silence. Then ringing. Not in my ears, in my skull. Sharp and cold, like static inside my brain. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I couldn't hear my own breath. Just that long, high-pitched whistle. I blinked. The windshield was cracked in spiderwebs. The dashboard lights flickered. My left arm dangled wrong, just limp, like it didn't know it was part of me anymore. Blood smeared across my jeans. I didn't know where it came from. Mike made a sound. It was low at first, then turned into a wheezy laugh. Like someone at the end of a movie they really liked. He coughed and kept laughing, sitting there with his hands gripping the steering wheel like we were parked at a drive-in. He pushed the door open and stumbled out, one foot dragging. "Dude," he called, "you gotta come see this dent, man." I didn't move. I kept breathing shallow, trying to stay conscious. The pain in my arm was bright, raw. I shifted, trying to find my phone, but it had flown somewhere under the seat. I couldn't lean down. Every nerve in my shoulder screamed when I moved. The Charger sat crooked, one tire half submerged in mud. Steam hissed from under the hood. The girl in the back was gone. Maybe she ran. I hadn't even heard the door open. Mike stood swaying in the ditch, still grinning like this was just another night. I saw a flicker of red and blue in the rear view. A patrol car crept up, slow, cautious. Its spotlight hit Mike in the chest. The cop stepped out. Young guy, maybe late 20s, hand near his holster. He looked at Mike, then the car, then spotted me slumped in the seat. "Sit down," he barked at Mike and keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I need EMS out on Route 19. One vehicle in ditch, possible injuries." Mike raised his hands like it was a joke. "It's all good, officer. Just a little miscalculation. We're fine." The cop didn't laugh. He walked toward me and opened the door. "Can you move?" I shook my head. He saw my arm and called again into his radio. Mike kept saying, "I had it under control. I know this car. She just slid a little." The officer ignored him. He stayed by me, asking questions. I couldn't answer most. My vision went blurry. I heard the ambulance before I saw it. Lights spinning, someone opening a kit, hands on my chest, voices checking vitals. Then a neck brace, stretcher, straps. I felt them lift me. The night sky turned in circles. At the hospital, everything blurred together. Bright lights, questions, needles, pain meds. X-rays showed my arm was fractured in 2 places. Shoulder dislocated, minor concussion. They kept me overnight. I drifted in and out, machines beeping nearby. The next afternoon, Mike walked into my room with a can of soda and nothing else. No flowers, no apology, not even a sandwich. He stood by the window and smiled like he was visiting a buddy with a cold. "So," he said, "when are you getting back in the passenger seat?" I stared at him. He wasn't joking. He thought this was just another story to tell, just another scar to laugh about. I realized right then that Mike wasn't going to change. He couldn't see the edge unless he fell off it himself, and maybe not even then. I told him to leave, said I didn't want to see him again. He looked surprised, maybe even hurt, but not enough to argue. He shrugged and walked out. That was the last time I saw him. Now, when I hear tires squeal on pavement, when I hear engines rev too loud in the night, I think of that laugh. I think of the cracked windshield, the smoke rising from the hood, and the sound of silence after the crash. It's easy to slip when you're walking next to recklessness. It happened last January, when I was working toward a promotion. I'd been staying late a lot, trying to impress my manager, logging every client interaction, and polishing up our Q4 numbers. I was drained, but also focused. At the corporate New Year dinner, people finally relaxed a little. Wine was flowing, and someone ordered shots, even though our boss was still sitting with us. That night, after most people had left, I was grabbing my coat when Nicholas came over. We'd worked together for almost 2 years. He was the kind of guy you'd share a laugh with over Slack but never really talk to outside the office. I always thought of him as friendly, a bit quiet, a little awkward sometimes, but nothing strange. He waited until we were outside to speak. The street was icy, and we walked together toward the metro. That's when he said it. He liked me. He said it like it had been eating at him for months. He wasn't pushy. Just said he thought I should know, in case I felt the same. I thanked him and said I didn't. I was honest but kind. Told him I saw him only as a friend. He nodded like he'd expected that, said it was fine, and that he respected my honesty. He even smiled a little before saying goodnight. After that, things were a bit off. We still talked, but less. Before, he'd swing by my desk to talk about bugs in the CRM or weird client requests. Now he mostly stayed quiet. I figured he needed space, which made sense. I didn't want things to be awkward, so I gave him that space. A couple of weeks passed, and things seemed to be leveling out. He started responding to team chats more. Even made a joke during a meeting. I thought maybe we were settling into a new, normal rhythm. Then I started seeing him at the gym. I go every Tuesday and Thursday morning before work. It's a small place 2 blocks from my apartment. Usually pretty empty that early. One morning, I was on the treadmill when I saw him walk in. He didn't see me at first. Just scanned the room and picked a bike in the corner. I hadn't known he went there. In fact, we'd once joked about how he hated gyms. I thought it was a coincidence at first. People change routines in the new year. But then he showed up again the next Thursday, and the Tuesday after that. He never said hi, just sort of hovered around. Not near me, but not far either. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. I told myself I was imagining it. Later, I started seeing him at the coffee shop across from our office. That was weirder. He wasn't a coffee guy. He used to bring green tea in a thermos, said he didn't like spending money on drinks. But suddenly he was sitting near the window almost every morning, reading something on his phone, watching the street. He never waved or came in when I was there. Just sat, always facing the same direction, always in the same spot. I stopped going there and switched to the smaller place down the block. Around the same time, I started getting messages from him late at night. Never anything inappropriate, just things like, "Hey, are you home?" or "Hope you're okay." I'd reply short, polite, never invited conversation. He'd say, "Good night," and that was it. I kept thinking he'd get over it eventually. But one night, around 1:30 a.m., I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting another one of those vague check-ins. Instead, it was a photo. It took a second for me to recognize it. My building's entrance, taken from across the street. The timestamp was 2 minutes earlier. Below the photo, he'd written, "Beautiful night." I didn't move, just stood there, toothbrush still in my hand. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the curtains in the kitchen were open. I turned the lights off immediately and moved away from the window. I changed my route home. Started getting off the metro a stop early, taking side streets, ducking into shops even when I didn't need anything. I watched shadows now, checked windows before unlocking the building door. But somehow, he still showed up. Sometimes across the street, sometimes on the corner, pretending to scroll his phone. Never close enough to confront, but always near enough that I knew he saw me. My friends said I should talk to him. Some thought maybe he just needed clarity, closure. One even said maybe he didn't realize how uncomfortable it had gotten. I knew they meant well, but I didn't want to have that conversation face to face. So I texted, clear and cold, told him to stop showing up, to stop messaging, to stay away from me. I said if he came near me again, I'd go to the police. He didn't answer. That Friday, I stayed home late working on the monthly report. The office was remote that day, and I had my laptop open, headphones on, Excel spreadsheets layered like a mess on my screen. It was quiet. Just the hum of the fridge, the tapping of my keyboard. I didn't hear the elevator stop, didn't hear the footsteps. Then, the sound of my door lock clicking. I froze. The handle turned, and the door flung open. Nicholas rushed in like he'd been holding his breath. His face was flushed, his shirt half untucked. He slammed the door behind him and stood in the middle of my living room, breathing hard. "What are you doing?" I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. He shook his head. His eyes were wide, glassy. "You don't get it," he said. "Nobody will ever get you like I do." I stood slowly, backing up a step. "You need to leave, Nicholas." "No," he said, and his voice cracked. "You don't mean that. I see it in how you look at me. I know you're scared of it, but we're supposed to be..." His hands were trembling. "They've poisoned you. They told you I'm crazy." I moved toward the shelf behind the couch where the lamp sat. "You broke in," I said. "This is insane." He stepped closer, reaching out. "Please, just listen. 10 minutes, that's all." I grabbed the lamp and swung. It hit his forearm with a dull crack. He yelled, more in surprise than pain. I slipped past him, heart pounding in my throat. He grabbed at my arm, but I twisted out, yanking open the apartment door. I ran barefoot into the hall and banged on the closest door. "Help, please." It opened. Mrs. Cohen, the elderly woman from 3B, was already holding her phone. Her hand shook, but she pulled me inside without a word. I turned and locked her door just as I heard my own slam shut behind me. The police came in 7 minutes. When they walked into my apartment, Nicholas was sitting on the living room floor, his legs crossed, staring ahead like in a trance. "I love her," he said when they cuffed him. He looked at me the whole time. Not angry, not wild, just betrayed. Like I'd promised him something and broken it. I didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there and watched as they walked him out. A restraining order came 2 weeks later. He wasn't allowed within 100 meters of my home or workplace. I changed the locks, installed a security alarm, a camera above the door with a feed I check every night before I sleep. I stopped going to the gym, switched coffee shops again. Some nights, I still wake up to the memory of that lock clicking open. I sleep with a flashlight under my pillow now. People tell you to be honest, that turning someone down gently is the kind thing to do. But I've learned that for some, just friends isn't an answer. It's a challenge. Obsession doesn't always look like red flags. Sometimes it starts with coffee across the street and ends with someone standing in your living room telling you that no one else will understand. Passion without consent is just danger in disguise. Derek and I had been friends since middle school. He was the kind of guy who joked a lot, especially when he didn't understand something. When I got Max, my beagle, Derek used to laugh every time I brought him along. "You treat that dog like a child," he'd say. I didn't mind. Max was calm, easy to handle, and I liked having him around. It was never a problem for anyone else. Things changed a bit when I met Lucy. She worked in admin at my office. We started dating slow, nothing serious at first, but then we got close. Derek seemed cool about it, at least at the beginning. He still came to the park with us sometimes, especially when we did Friday evening walks. But his jokes started getting sharper. Like one time we were walking near the lake and Max stopped to sniff around. Derek said, "Hope the mutt's not sniffing out a corpse. You two spend more time with him than actual people." Lucy didn't laugh. I let it slide, thinking he was just in a mood. Maybe jealous I had plans most weekends now. Before Lucy, it was always me and Derek. Movies, beers, dumb stuff on YouTube till late. Even when the jokes got more personal, we kept inviting him. Game nights, casual BBQs, that kind of stuff. He never said no, but I noticed he'd show up late, make side comments, and leave early. Lucy mentioned it a few times, asked if I thought he was okay. I said yeah, probably just lonely. 2 weekends ago, we were planning a trip to my uncle's cottage up north. It's about a 3-hour drive. Quiet place, near a small lake. No Wi-Fi, barely any cell reception, but great for relaxing. I told Derek we were going. He immediately asked to come. Normally I'd say sure, but this time I told him we were keeping it small. Just me, Lucy, and Max. He gave this weird smile, like he didn't believe me. Then he said, "Right. Dog first, friends second." He turned and walked out. I didn't hear from him after that. 2 days later, Max stopped eating. Not just fussy. He wouldn't touch his food or treats. At first I thought he had a stomach bug or ate something weird off the ground. I took him to the vet the next morning. Blood work, x-rays. The vet came back looking serious. "There's rat poison in his system," he said. I didn't understand. We don't use poison. Our backyard's fenced, and Max barely leaves my side. I asked Lucy if maybe one of her neighbors put out traps. She said she'd check. I called Derek, thinking maybe he saw something last time he visited. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. Nothing too accusatory, just asked if he noticed Max chewing anything strange. No response. I texted the guys from our friend group, the ones who came over for the last barbecue. Asked if they'd seen anything off near the garage or behind the shed. One of them said he remembered Max barking at something in the bushes, but thought it was just a squirrel or raccoon. Another said he'd seen a small box under the stairs but thought it was fertilizer. I checked the yard myself. Under the porch, behind the trash bins, even inside the tool shed. Found nothing. I stayed up late that night just watching Max sleep on the couch. He looked tired, barely moved. Lucy cried a little, but I tried to stay calm. I sat on the back steps for a while, thinking. Then I remembered an old trail camera I used to use when I went hiking. Motion sensor, night vision, pretty basic. Next morning, I dug it out from the garage shelf, dusted it off, and charged the batteries. Around sunset, I fixed it to the porch post, facing the steps that led up from the side yard. It wasn't super hidden, but someone would have to look close to spot it. I left it on all night. That night, I sat in the kitchen with the laptop open and the SD card loaded. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the motion sensor had picked up someone climbing partway over the side fence just after 2:30 a.m. They didn't come all the way in, just leaned in and tossed a small plastic bag over. I replayed the moment 5 times. Same walk, same frame, same throw. Then I paused the video and looked closer. The jacket. I recognized it immediately. A faded green bomber with a patch on the right sleeve. Some kind of custom design he used to brag about. Derek wore it every fall since high school. It even had a tiny tear on the collar. Same damn tear. The figure's head turned just enough for me to see the rough profile. Not perfect, but close. Too close. Max was in the crate next to me, curled up and weak. He barely lifted his head when I moved. His breathing sounded better but still rough. Lucy had gone to bed, but I sat up another hour, just staring at the screen. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what the hell he was thinking. I picked up the phone and called him around 8 the next morning. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "You around today? I've got some weird animal stuff in the backyard. Thought you could take a look." He answered fast but sounded off, like he hadn't slept. "Yeah, sure. I mean, what kind of stuff?" "Just some holes near the shed. Thought maybe rats or something. Didn't want to set poison 'cause of Max." There was a pause. Then he said, "Man, I love animals. You know that. That dog. He's like your kid." That line hit weird. I didn't say anything. Then I asked, "You haven't been by lately, right? Yard's been quiet?" Another pause. His voice cracked a bit. "No. Not since the barbecue, I think." I told him I'd text later and hung up. That was all I needed. I copied the footage to a USB and drove straight to the precinct. No drama, no confrontation. Just walked in, asked to file a report, and handed them the clip. The officer who took it asked a few questions, mostly about the time and what I found in the yard. I told them what the vet said, what Max ate, how we found no traps or poison anywhere. I didn't tell anyone about Derek's jacket. Not yet. By that afternoon, officers had gone to Derek's apartment. I stayed in the pet hospital's waiting room, next to Max's crate. Lucy brought coffee and sat beside me, not saying much. Her hand stayed on my knee the whole time. Around 6 p.m., a detective called me. Said they confronted Derek, showed him the footage. First he denied it. Then he said it was just a prank. But when they pressed, he cracked. Admitted it. Said he was tired of being the extra guy. Claimed he never meant to hurt Max, only scare me into realizing how much I relied on the dog over friends. He hadn't known there was a camera. Said it outright. I didn't think anyone would see. It was just one time. They charged him with animal cruelty and trespassing. He didn't resist. Didn't even ask for a lawyer right away. Max made it. Barely. The vet said timing was everything. 12 more hours, and it might have gone the other way. The poison left a scar on his ear, a dry patch where the fur never grew back. But he walked again, started eating, even wagged his tail when Lucy brought a squeaky toy one afternoon. I changed the locks that week, took down all the framed photos of Derek, deleted him from group chats, cleared him from socials. There was one old photo, me, him, and Max at the lake. I stared at it a while before deleting it too. Now when someone new gets close to my life, I remember that scar on Max. It's small but clear. A reminder. Jealousy doesn't yell. It whispers, smiles, waits. And sometimes, it throws poison over your fence when you're not looking. Last June, I was feeling stuck with work and needed a change of scenery. I do freelance editing and had been staring at the same walls for weeks. My friend Chris texted me about doing a thriller movie marathon at his place over the weekend. He was always into crime and mystery stuff, books, films, even true crime podcasts. I figured it couldn't hurt. Chris lived alone in his parents' old house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. They'd moved abroad a couple of years ago, and he stayed behind to keep the place up. I packed a small bag with my laptop, charger, some snacks, and a change of clothes. I even brought my pajama pants, thinking I could relax while doing a bit of editing between movies. I got there around 6 p.m. The sun was still up, casting long shadows from the tall trees that lined the driveway. The house looked the same as I remembered. Faded brown siding, one window cracked open upstairs, the front porch sagging slightly. Chris greeted me with his usual grin and a firm handshake. He looked more tired than usual, but I didn't think much of it. He said he had a few movies picked out, already downloaded, and we could start after dinner. We threw a frozen pizza in the oven, and he poured some cheap whiskey into mismatched mugs. I set my laptop on the coffee table in the living room and opened a few work files, but the smell of pizza and the glow of the TV were distracting. We started with an old noir film, then moved on to a newer, more violent thriller. Chris kept the lights dim, only a small lamp on in the corner. His big TV sat against one wall, surrounded by stacks of DVDs and dusty books. He sat in an armchair while I stretched out on the couch under a thin blanket. I remember checking the time around 11:30, halfway through the third film. I must have nodded off not long after that. The TV's flickering light, the droning sound of dialogue, and the warm buzz of the whiskey made it hard to keep my eyes open. At the time, everything still felt normal. Just a lazy movie night between friends. I figured I'd sleep on the couch and head home sometime the next day. I woke up to a sharp, searing pain in the back of my head. My vision blurred for a second, and I felt something warm trickling down my neck. My hand shot up to the spot, and it came away sticky with blood. I tried to sit up, but my head throbbed and my arms felt slow. The room was dim, but I could still make out Chris standing over me, holding a black workout kettlebell. His face didn't show panic or surprise, just this blank, focused stare, like he was studying something under glass. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was nothing behind them except cold curiosity. I croaked out, "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer, didn't even blink. Just stood there, one foot half on the rug, the other braced like he was expecting me to move again. I tried to shift, to push myself up, but my head spun and I nearly slipped off the couch. The TV was still on, showing static now. The air was heavy with the smell of burnt cheese. The pizza must have been left in the oven too long. My laptop was closed on the table, next to an empty glass and a folded napkin. But it was the thing next to the glass that made my stomach twist. A knife. One of those rainbow-tinted ones, the kind that changes color in the light. It lay flat against the wooden surface, catching the flicker from the TV and glinting purple, green, and blue. I turned my body toward the other side of the couch, trying to create space between me and him, but even that small motion made my head pound. Chris didn't move. He just watched, his grip on the kettlebell loosening slightly, then tightening again. Chris took a step forward and raised the kettlebell again. I threw my arm up without thinking, and the heavy metal slammed into it before glancing off and hitting the edge of the couch with a loud thud. Pain shot through my arm, but it gave me just enough time. I grabbed a throw pillow from behind my back and hurled it at him, not to hurt him, but to block his view for a second. He flinched, just enough for me to scramble off the couch and stumble toward the hallway. My balance was off. I had to drag myself along the walls. The wallpaper scraped against my shoulder as I moved. I could barely stay upright. Every few steps, I bounced off a picture frame or the corner of a cabinet. My socks slipped on the hardwood. I reached the front door and grabbed the knob, twisting hard, but it didn't budge. Locked. I turned the bolt, yanked, kicked, still nothing. It was stuck or jammed, and I couldn't think straight enough to figure out why. I pounded on the door with my fists, over and over. My knuckles started to go numb, then raw. I screamed for help, over and over. The sound was hoarse, weak, barely louder than a cough. My head felt too light, like I might drop right there. Then, faint but real, I heard something. A shout. A voice from somewhere outside. I wasn't sure if I imagined it until I heard it again, louder this time. A woman yelling. It had to be the neighbor. I kept banging on the door, screaming as loud as I could manage, hoping she'd call someone, anyone. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, like he was in no rush. Then the door burst open with a cracking sound, the wood splintering. I fell back, slamming into the hallway floor. A man's figure rushed past me, solid and fast. Doug, the neighbor from across the street. I didn't even get a full look at him before I saw Chris coming up behind me, knife in hand now. He lunged, and I felt a hot sting across my forearm. I didn't even process the pain right away, just the sensation of skin splitting open. But Doug grabbed him around the shoulders, pulling him down with all his weight. They hit the ground hard. There was a struggle, fists and legs thrashing. Doug pinned Chris with his knee and twisted his arm until the knife dropped. I slid back into the doorway, breathing in short, broken gasps. Someone had already called the cops. I could hear the sirens coming. Blue and red lights flickered through the broken front door. I sat on the threshold, legs stretched out on the cold tile, staring at the floor. Blood from my arm dripped onto the worn carpet. Chris didn't scream or curse. He didn't even try to explain himself. He just looked around, eyes scanning faces like he was still collecting data, like he wanted to know how it all turned out. The officers came in fast, shouted orders, and hauled him up. They cuffed him and led him out, past me. His eyes met mine, flat and unreadable. At the hospital, they stitched up my head and bandaged my arm. I had a concussion, a fractured wrist, and the deep cut across my forearm needed a lot of care. The doctors worked quietly, doing their job. The nurses were calm. I remember watching the ceiling tiles while they cleaned the blood off me, not really thinking about anything, just letting it happen. Later, the police asked questions. A lot of them. I answered what I could, but the truth is, I didn't understand much either. The psychiatrist said Chris was dangerous and unstable. Not insane in the legal sense, but not safe to be around anyone. Something about dissociative thinking, emotional detachment, and obsessive tendencies. He'd been hiding it for years. His fascination with crime and violence wasn't just entertainment, it was a study. They sent him to a secured psychiatric facility. I never saw him again. I deleted every horror movie app from my phone. When someone mentions a thriller night now, I just smile and shake my head. I listen to my gut more. If someone's drawn to darkness a little too much, I don't ignore it. I don't make excuses for them, and I never stay alone with them. Friends who turn pain into entertainment aren't friends. It happened the night before last, during my second to last shift of the week. I was just finishing a delivery route when my phone rang. It was Tony, an old friend I hadn't seen in months. We weren't close anymore, but we had history. He didn't waste time on pleasantries, just said, "I need a lift. Now. You nearby?" I was only about 10 minutes away, so I told him I'd be there. He sent me a location pin. It was by the old industrial warehouses off Route 6. Those buildings hadn't been in use for years, just rusted out steel frames and busted windows. I pulled up beside the loading dock, engine running. Tony was already outside, pacing in the dark with a gym bag clutched in one hand. He looked like he hadn't slept. Hoodie half-zipped, jeans dirty at the knees, shoes scuffed like he'd been running. When he got in, he was breathing heavy, like he'd just finished a sprint. He didn't say anything about where we were going, just shut the door, threw the bag at his feet, and said, "Drive. Don't stop." I didn't ask questions. I'd done enough late-night favors to know when not to talk. Still, the way he looked kept tugging at my thoughts. Pale, twitchy, eyes darting to the mirrors. I kept checking the rear view too, even though I didn't know what I was looking for. We turned onto the main road, and I tried to act normal, tried to drive steady. But Tony kept shifting in his seat like he couldn't get comfortable. At one point he looked over his shoulder, then out the rear window, and muttered, "Come on, come on," like he was waiting for something. I glanced at the bag. It was zipped shut but sagging like it was full of bricks. I wanted to ask what was inside, but I didn't. I kept both hands on the wheel. Just before we reached the underpass, he said it again, louder this time. "Don't stop, no matter what." A few seconds later, blue lights popped up in my rear view. First just a flash, then full strobes. A patrol car, moving fast, right behind us. I didn't panic at first. I figured maybe I'd rolled a stop sign or missed a light. Then I saw Tony move. He reached down, unzipped the bag, and pulled out a pistol. A big one. Black slide, heavy in his hands. He set it right on his lap. No words for a few seconds. Just him sitting with that gun, breathing like a steam vent. Then he looked at me and said, "Step on it." I froze for a second, not sure if he was serious. He didn't raise his voice, didn't yell. Just sat there, gun resting on his knees, staring through the windshield like the road would swallow us. Then the radio crackled. I always kept the police band running on long drives. That night, it nearly stopped my heart. Suspect is armed and fleeing in a dark gray van. Last seen heading south on Route 6. Approach with caution. Armed robbery in progress. I didn't say anything. Just kept both hands tight on the wheel. My foot came off the gas by reflex. Tony must have felt it, because he pressed the pistol against the passenger side window, hard enough that it made a faint thud. "Don't slow down," he said. We were flying down the avenue, headlights whipping past, other cars jerking to the sides to avoid us. Horns blared, brakes screeched, but I kept the van steady. The wheel trembled under my grip. Tony was yelling now, shouting something I couldn't process all at once. Then clear words cut through the noise. "Hit the barrier if you have to." Ahead, I saw flashing blue and red filling the street. A line of police cruisers had set up across the road like a wall. Their lights lit up the asphalt, creating sharp shadows, like a final checkpoint. I had maybe 4 seconds to react. My eyes darted right, and I saw a narrow side path, an exit ramp that curved sharply into a strip mall parking lot. Tight, but maybe enough. Without a word, I jerked the wheel right. Tires screamed. The whole van shuddered as it shifted weight hard to one side. I thought it might roll. Tony wasn't braced. He slammed sideways into the door, and the bag flew forward, smacking him right in the face. He cursed loud, one hand scrambling to catch the pistol as it slid toward the footwell. We tore into the parking lot, bumping over a curb. I saw shopping carts scatter and a few people diving behind cars. I had no idea if they'd followed us, but I didn't care. I hit the brake as hard as I could. The van skidded to a stop just short of the front of a closed supermarket. I threw the gear into park without even thinking, then yanked the door handle and jumped out. Hands up, both in the air. I ran 2 steps away from the van and shouted loud as I could, "I'm a hostage! I'm not with him!" The second the words left my mouth, everything shifted. I saw figures behind the police cars drop low, some ducking behind hoods, rifles lifted. They weren't aiming at me. They were watching the van. Tony got out slower. He was hunched, unsteady. He still held the gun, but it was pointed down, one knee buckled. He tried to say something, but he slipped on the concrete. The bag flew open as he hit the ground, and stacks of bills fanned out like leaves. They were on him in a second. 3 officers tackled him from different sides, boots hitting the pavement in fast thuds. He didn't resist, didn't fire, just lay still as they pinned his arms and took the weapon. I didn't move. My hands stayed up, and I couldn't feel my legs. My knees were wobbling. One of the officers gestured for me to come slowly. I did. The ground felt uneven, like I was walking across a ship deck in storm waves. They pulled me behind a cruiser, frisked me, and shouted questions I barely heard. I kept repeating the same thing. He called me. I just gave him a ride. I didn't know. They checked my ID, checked the van, bagged the weapon. Someone snapped photos. One guy took notes on a clipboard. A detective came over and asked if I knew what was in the bag. I said no. Eventually they separated us. Tony was cuffed and stuffed in the back of a cruiser, still breathing hard, face red. He didn't look at me once. After the questioning, they told me I was free to go. "You're listed as a victim here," the officer said. "The vehicle stays with us for evidence." I nodded. Didn't argue. I didn't even ask how I'd get home. It was almost 5 a.m. when I walked into my apartment. I hadn't spoken since they let me go. My hands were still trembling. I filled a glass of water and didn't drink it. Just held it and stared out the window. I kept thinking about that phone call, the way he'd said now, with no explanation. I could have asked more questions, could have waited, but I didn't. I just showed up. That night I learned the most dangerous turns aren't on the road. They're in the people you trust without thinking. Since then, even if it's a close friend, I ask the one thing I didn't ask Tony. Why do you need my help right now? After my breakup, the apartment felt bigger and emptier than I remembered. Most nights I stayed up too late, watching videos or walking from room to room doing nothing in particular. On Wednesday, Lewis from work asked if he could crash at my place for a few days. His building had a plumbing issue or something like that. I didn't ask for details. I just said sure. I didn't want to be alone anyway. He came with one duffel bag, a 6-pack, and an old photo album he found in a box while moving. He said it might be funny to look through. We ended up spending hours flipping through photos of family members I didn't know and parties from the early 2000s. He stayed in the spare room, and we mostly kept to ourselves during the day. He worked the late shift. I did mornings. We barely crossed paths except for the occasional beer at night. He had this habit of leaving small things around, his socks in the living room, his phone charging in the kitchen. After the 4th day, I noticed his toothbrush was gone, and his duffel was zipped up by the door. On the 5th night, I came home to a short note. Found a room, left tonight. Thanks, man. I didn't reply. I just stood in the hallway a while, then tossed the note in the trash. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. No clinking bottles in the kitchen, no bathroom light left on at 2 a.m. I packed up the blanket he'd been using, folded it roughly, and put the beer bottles out with the recycling. I vacuumed the spare room and pushed the door mostly closed. A few times I paused, thinking I heard a thump or something shifting, but the place was quiet, or quiet enough. 2 nights later, I opened the fridge to grab a drink and noticed 2 cans missing. Just regular lager, nothing special, but I was sure there had been 5. Now there were 3. I figured maybe I had a couple more the night before than I remembered. I didn't think much of it. Then I heard footsteps. Not heavy. Just a short series of creaks, one after another. Above me. Like someone walking slowly across the attic. The thing is, the attic isn't finished. No one uses it. No floorboards, no insulation. Just beams and old boxes left by the previous tenant. The kind of place you'd never go without shoes or a flashlight. I stood still for maybe a minute, listening. Nothing followed. I walked around the apartment. All the windows were closed. The front door was still locked. Probably wood shifting, I told myself. The building's from the 60s, and it's been through a few winters. Still, I kept glancing up at the ceiling like I expected to see dust fall. That evening, I passed by the hallway closet and noticed something that stopped me. The pull-down attic ladder, the thin aluminum one, was slightly off. Just an inch. It wasn't flush with the ceiling like it should be. The hatch was settled, but not sealed tight. I pressed it back up and clicked it in place. Probably the air pressure, I thought, or a loose hinge. Still, I stood there another 30 seconds and then grabbed a chair from the kitchen. Climbed up, turned on my phone flashlight, and opened the hatch. It swung down without noise. I pushed my head up into the attic space. Just wood, dust, some fiberglass in the corners. I slowly scanned the beam paths with the phone light. The bulb picked out a broken cardboard box, a few cobwebs, and a stack of papers slumped near the wall. No signs of rodents, no droppings, no noise. I stayed up there about a minute, then came back down, closed the hatch carefully. Later that night, I lay in bed, watching the hall light under my door. I told myself I'd call a pest guy in the morning, just in case. Maybe squirrels, maybe birds, maybe nothing. But before I fell asleep, I set a heavy book on top of the attic hatch, just to be sure. In the morning, I noticed the bread was gone. A sealed pack of deli meat, too. I checked the trash. Nothing. The wrappers weren't there. I hadn't eaten them. I was sure of it this time. The beer had already gone missing earlier in the week, but now it was obvious. Something wasn't right. That afternoon, I bought a small indoor camera online. Just motion-activated, simple model. I installed it in the hallway aimed directly at the attic ladder. I figured if it was animals, I'd see them. If someone was breaking in, I'd catch them. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just waited. At 2:37 a.m., my phone vibrated. Notification from the camera app. Motion detected. I didn't get up right away. I just stared at the screen. The clip loaded. Black and white night vision. A soft blur at first, then clear enough. A figure. Moving across the hallway, barely a sound. Slow. Careful. It stopped at the attic hatch and reached up. I sat upright, heart thudding. The camera caught the edge of a shoulder, a side profile, then the arm disappearing upward. The hatch creaked open just a little. The figure slipped inside. It was enough. I saw the face, even in grainy night vision. It was Lewis. I grabbed the flashlight and a screwdriver. Didn't put on shoes. Just stepped carefully to the hallway. The hatch was slightly open again. The heavy book I'd placed was gone, pushed aside. I pulled the ladder down, quiet as I could. Climbed one step, then two. The light from my phone shook as I moved it upward. Then his face popped out from the darkness. His skin was gray with dust. Eyes wide, darting left to right. Lips cracked like he hadn't had water in days. Hair stuck to his forehead. He didn't blink. "Lewis," I said quietly, frozen on the ladder. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Just looked around like he was making sure I was alone. I didn't move. He slowly pushed up with one arm and crawled forward out of the hatch like an animal emerging from a hole. The flashlight hit his face fully. His pupils were huge. Sweat glistened across his face, but he was shivering. His jaw moved like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out for a second. Then he whispered, "Don't kick me out. Please. I can't be anywhere else." He slid down the ladder, grabbing my shoulder for balance. His grip was weak, but clinging. "Nowhere feels safe. Just here. Only here," he muttered, not making full eye contact. I stepped back, and he tightened his hand on my arm. "Don't," he said, voice suddenly sharp. He looked behind me, like someone else might be listening. I told him we needed to talk in the living room. I started stepping back toward the hallway, keeping the flashlight on him. His eyes narrowed. He tensed. Then he let out this weird, broken sound. Not quite a shout. Not quite a cry. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something heavy. I saw metal glint. He swung it hard toward my head. I caught his wrist with both hands, twisted back with everything I had. The object fell, just a thick padlock on a strap. Probably used it to smash through old boards up there. I shoved him off and yanked the ladder up. He clawed at the edge, screaming. "You liar! You said I could stay! You promised!" he shouted. I slammed the hatch shut. He pounded it from the inside. I held it with my shoulder, grabbed my phone with one hand, and called 911. My breath was shallow. The operator asked if the person was armed. I said yes. I gave my address. They told me to stay locked in a room. But I didn't move. I stayed by the hatch, knees locked, holding it shut. His fists kept hitting the panel. Then he started sobbing, then laughing. Sirens came 8 minutes later. Police banged at the door, came in, guns drawn. I opened the attic hatch and backed away. They pulled him out screaming, still barefoot, still muttering about safety and warmth. One of them wrapped a blanket around him. He kept saying, "It's only safe here. You don't understand." They cuffed him and walked him out. One cop stayed behind and asked a lot of questions. I showed him the video. They said they'd seen squatters before, but not like this. They sent Lewis to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. Said he wouldn't be released anytime soon. I haven't heard anything since. I installed a steel hatch cover 2 days later. Triple bolts, reinforced frame. The attic's sealed now, but I still hear every creak. I don't let guests stay over anymore. Not even family. I don't open the spare room unless I need the vacuum. The trust I had for people, I don't know if it's coming back. What happened wasn't about ghosts or demons or anything like that. It was worse. It was someone I knew. Someone I thought was harmless. Someone who smiled at work and handed me a beer and said thank you, and then decided my home was his. Check your attic, and check your friends. A couch for the weekend isn't an invitation for forever. It happened last summer, right after college finals. Lana and I were sharing a small apartment in Seattle. It was one of those older buildings near Capitol Hill, creaky floors and thin walls. But the rent was cheap, and the sunlight came in nice through the east-facing window in the mornings. We weren't best friends, more like classmates who didn't want to live alone. But she was easy to be around. She liked to sit behind me when I drew, just quietly watching. I'd be sketching for hours sometimes, and I'd forget she was even there until I turned and saw her curled up on the couch, staring at the back of my head. The first thing she copied was my jacket. I had this faded green bomber I wore nearly every day. One week she disappeared to her mom's house in Tacoma, and when she came back, she was wearing the exact same one. Not just similar, same cut, same patches, even the frayed left sleeve. "Twins," she joked when I noticed. I laughed. Honestly, I thought it was funny at first. She didn't have many friends. I figured maybe she just liked having someone to be close to. Then she cut her hair like mine. I had shoulder-length dark brown hair with blunt bangs. A few weeks after the jacket thing, she came home from a walk-in salon and looked like my mirror image. I was brushing my teeth when she walked in, and for a second I thought it was me. She grinned and asked if I liked it. I didn't say no. I just told her it looked good. I chalked it up to admiration. She said she always thought I had cool style. We started shopping together more often. She'd pick up clothes I was trying on and say, "You should get this, then I'll get it too." Sometimes she'd put stuff back just because I didn't buy it. If I said a dress was ugly, she'd wrinkle her nose and agree. When I painted my nails black, hers were black the next day. If I was drinking iced oat milk lattes, suddenly she was too. At the time, I thought it was harmless. Like, it was a little odd, yeah. But I told myself it was just her way of feeling connected. She didn't grow up in the city, and she mentioned once or twice that she always felt behind, like she was catching up to the way other girls her age acted or dressed. I felt bad for her. I liked that she wanted to do stuff with me. I didn't see a threat, just a kind of intense friendship. But then things started to get blurry. A few weeks after finals, Lana told a stranger at a party that her name was Cassie. That's my name. I didn't even catch it at first. Someone called out Cassie, and we both turned. I thought it was a joke. "You said your name was Cassie?" I asked her later in the kitchen. She smiled and said, "It just came out. I guess I've been around you too much." I forced a laugh and shrugged it off. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But then I started noticing my business cards were missing. I'd printed them for freelance illustration gigs, left a few by the front door. One night, I saw an email open on her laptop when she stepped away to take a call. It was to a local design agency. She'd attached her portfolio, mostly graphic design, and used one of my cards as a reference. She signed off as Cassie Lane. I stared at it for a few seconds before closing the tab. My stomach dropped a little. That didn't feel like a joke. The next day, a guy from the coffee shop across the street stopped me on my way out. "Looking forward to Friday," he said. I gave him a blank look. "The date?" he added, smiling. I shook my head slowly. "I think you're confusing me with someone else." His face fell. He glanced back toward the apartment building. "You aren't Cassie? The artist?" I nodded, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. That night I asked Lana about it. She shrugged, said it wasn't a big deal. "He was cute," she said. I just went with it. I laughed, because what else could I do? But I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about how easy it was for her to wear my name, my work, my identity, like it was a shirt she borrowed. I told her the next morning that it was getting weird. I said, "I think you're taking this too far." She didn't argue. She just stared at me, her mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't say anything, just walked into her room and shut the door. For the next few days, we barely spoke. The apartment felt cold, even though it was the middle of June. I'd come home and find her sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, headphones in. She wouldn't even look up. I spent more time out, at the library, in cafes, on long walks, just to avoid the silence. After about a week, I decided I needed to move out. I found a room listed in the U district, not fancy but clean, and the other girl seemed normal. I told Lana one morning as she was pouring cereal. She didn't say anything for a second, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. Her voice was flat. Her eyes stayed on the spoon as she stirred her bowl. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes were shiny, like they were holding something back. They didn't look sad, though. Just strange. Cold. Like glass. That night before I moved out, I woke up to the sound of the door creaking open. It was slow, deliberate, like someone didn't want to be heard, but didn't care if they were. I opened my eyes and saw Lana standing at the foot of my bed. She was holding something in her right hand, low by her thigh. It took a second to register. The kitchen knife, the one I kept on the magnetic strip above the stove. She was barefoot, wearing one of my old sweatshirts, and her eyes were wide open, glassy. Her voice shook, like she was trying to hold herself together. "I need your life," she whispered. It wasn't loud, but it landed like a gunshot. I kicked at the chair near my bed, knocked it over as I jumped up. The crash startled her, but only for a second. She raised the knife and stepped forward fast. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a pillow, and shoved it up just as she swung. The blade sliced into the fabric with a tearing sound. Feathers exploded in the air. I shoved her back with the pillow and ran for the hallway. She screamed behind me, footsteps pounding after mine. "We were one," she yelled. "You promised we'd be one." The hallway felt like it stretched forever, my bare feet slipping on the hardwood. I didn't look back. I hit my neighbor's door and slammed my fist against it. No answer. She was closer. I hit it again, harder, screaming now. The lock clicked. The door opened just enough for me to push through, knocking the guy back a step. I shouted, "Call the police!" Just as Lana reached the doorway, knife still in her grip. He slammed the door and locked it. We heard her on the other side, yelling, "She lied to you. She's not real. I'm the real Cassie." Her voice cracked like something inside her was tearing. Minutes later, sirens. I heard them take her down on the stairs, boots on wood, shouting, the click of metal cuffs. I didn't move until they said she was gone. The precinct psychiatrist saw her the next day. They said she was suffering from a delusional identity disorder, complicated by prolonged fixation and boundary dissolution. I was in the hospital hallway when they rolled her out on a stretcher. She was strapped down, but her head turned when she saw me. Her mouth moved. "Cassie, wait," she whispered. Her eyes didn't look angry, just empty, like no one was inside anymore. A doctor spoke to me in a quiet room, using calm words and long explanations. "She doesn't know where she ends and you begin," he said. "There are no lines in her mind." My hands were shaking as I held the release forms. I could feel the weight of the pen, too heavy for something so small. I signed them without looking at the lines. Later, the police searched her room. They found boxes, 6 in total, each one carefully labeled. Inside were my drawings, printed copies she'd made from my laptop. Some were half-colored, like she'd tried to finish them herself. There were receipts for clothes we'd never shopped for together, duplicates of everything I owned. One box had a wig styled like my hair before I cut it short. The largest box was labeled Cassie, and it had old cups I'd thrown away, tissues, broken pencils, a cracked mug from my college. Things I hadn't even noticed were missing. That night I packed the rest of my stuff and didn't sleep. I kept the light on until the sun rose. I moved to another state 2 weeks later, got a room in a different city, signed up for a new number, new email. I didn't tell anyone except my brother where I went. I changed the profile picture on all my socials, deleted the public ones. Still, sometimes I catch myself glancing at mirrors longer than I should, checking my reflection for something off. Some days I expect to see her standing behind me, like she used to, silently watching. Lana was transferred to a secure psychiatric facility outside Olympia. I haven't heard anything since. No letters, no calls. I don't want to know more. I'm writing this now not for closure, because I'm not sure that ever really comes. I'm writing this to say, if someone copies your every move, every word, every thread of your life, don't brush it off. Don't laugh. Don't wait for it to stop. People aren't outfits you can try on. Friendship is built on shared respect, not stolen identity. When someone starts wearing your skin, it's already too late. When I was 24, I thought Zach had my back. We were in the same college group, sat through the same boring lectures, partied nearly every night. It felt like I could trust him with anything. Nothing too deep, but little stuff. Things I wouldn't say to anyone else. He laughed at my jokes, covered for me when I skipped classes, and once even lent me cash when I was short on rent. After graduation, by some weird coincidence, we ended up in the same company. Different teams, but same open-floor office. It felt safe, familiar. The first few months were smooth. Occasional lunch breaks, quick jokes in the corridor, some Slack messages during boring meetings. One evening, Zach messaged me around 5, asked if I wanted to grab a beer. I didn't think twice. We hit the usual bar near the office, a place with sticky tables and cheap pints. It was just the two of us. I thought maybe he needed to talk about something work-related, or maybe just blow off steam. We sat down in a corner booth, cold beer already sweating onto the coaster. After some small talk about deadlines and a bad client call, he leaned back and said, "Remember that photo from junior year? The one where you're lifting that guy's coursework?" I froze for half a second, then gave a short laugh. "Dumbest day ever," I said. "Can't believe someone actually took a picture." He didn't smile. Just sipped his drink and looked off toward the bar. I tried not to read into it. I chalked it up to nostalgia. Or maybe he'd been scrolling old photos and found it funny. I didn't bring it up again. After another round, we paid and walked out. I headed to the metro, didn't think more about it. A week later, I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. It was from Zach. No text, just an image. I opened it and my stomach dropped. It was that photo. Grainy but clear enough to show me in the library, slipping the printed coursework into my backpack. The guy who wrote it was facing away, headphones on. I stared at it for a few seconds before replying. "Why send this?" Zach replied after a pause. "Funny how old things come back around, right?" I typed out, "What do you want?" Then deleted it. Instead I wrote, "Bit random, man," and added a nervous laughing emoji. No reply. I tried not to think about it, but every time I saw him in the office, something felt off. He was talking to people more quietly, glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking. At lunch, he sat with others. He never mentioned the photo again. Mid-week, he pinged me on Slack. "Let's catch up about a small business thing." I asked him to clarify, but he just said it'd make more sense in person. Said he had an idea. I figured maybe he was starting something on the side and wanted to loop me in. Stress can make people act weird. I shrugged it off. That Friday, as people were packing up and the office started to empty, Zach stopped by my desk. "Got a minute?" I followed him out without saying much. We walked past the security desk, through the side door, and into the parking lot behind the building. The sky was that dull gray you get in early spring, air still cold but not freezing. Zach lit a cigarette, even though I'd never seen him smoke. He leaned against a concrete post and said, "You know, reputation's a tricky thing. Sometimes it's all you got." I looked at him. He wasn't smiling. "Okay. Just saying," he continued, flicking ash to the ground. "Some stuff, even old stuff, can cost someone their job, or worse." I didn't answer right away. My heart was ticking fast, but I forced a small laugh and said, "Come on, man. That was years ago. You're not seriously bringing that up now." He shrugged, didn't respond. We stood in silence for a bit. Then he dropped the cigarette and stepped on it. "Anyway," he said, like he'd just remembered something boring. "Have a good weekend." I nodded and walked toward the street. Didn't look back. On the way home, my mind was spinning. Was that a threat? A joke? Some weird test? I convinced myself it was just his way of messing around. Maybe trying to see if I'd panic. Maybe he was testing our friendship, trying to get a reaction. I told myself it was nothing serious. Just a joke gone too far. On Monday morning, there was a plain white envelope on my desk. No name, no markings. I looked around the office, but no one seemed to be watching. I opened it slowly. Inside was the same photo Zach had sent me. A printed copy this time, sharp and undeniable. Folded around it was a sticky note. $5,000 by Friday or everyone finds out. My hands went cold. I glanced at the door to the hallway, half expecting him to walk in smirking. He didn't. I stuffed the photo and note deep into my bag and sat down, trying to breathe normally. At lunch, I went into the kitchen to grab coffee. Zach followed a few minutes later. He opened the fridge, pulled out an energy drink, and without turning, said quietly, "Your folks wouldn't love to see that photo, huh?" I didn't say anything, just walked out. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a prank. This wasn't a joke or some test of loyalty. This was real. He wanted money. He planned it. My name, my job, my family. He was ready to hit every target. I spent the next hour pretending to work while scrolling legal forums on my phone. Finally, I just left. Took a cab straight to the local police station. Inside, I told them everything. The officer at the front desk asked a few routine questions, then brought me to a detective. I handed over the note and photo. He looked at them, nodded once, and said, "We can help you, but you'll need to get him talking." I didn't love the idea, but I agreed. They gave me a small recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive. Clipped it to the inside of my jacket. We planned the meeting for Thursday evening. Zach had mentioned a garage once, way out near the train yards, where he kept an old car. I messaged him, said I had the money and would meet him there after work. He replied with just a thumbs-up emoji. The place was exactly how I remembered. Concrete floors, metal walls streaked with rust, old tires stacked in the corner. I got there early, heart pounding in my ears. Empty, except for the faint smell of oil and damp dust. The only light came from one hanging bulb near the center. I waited by the entrance until I saw his car headlights sweep across the wall. He pulled up, stepped out, and closed the door with one hand, the other twirling a ring of keys. "Got it?" he said, nodding at my coat. I pulled the envelope from my inside pocket and held it out. He snatched it, opened the flap, and started counting the bills. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "We were friends," he scoffed. "Friends? You don't get it. People forget favors, but they never forget leverage." He kept counting. "You think you're the only one? I've got folders, man. Years of notes, screenshots, recordings. Some of these guys would pay 10 times what you just did to stay clean." My stomach twisted, but I kept my face still. "Why me then?" "Because you were easy. Always thought you were smarter than everyone else. That photo's just the beginning. You think your manager wouldn't fire you on the spot?" His voice was rising now, hands waving. "You think your dad wouldn't flip seeing his son steal some kid's work like a street rat?" I nodded slowly, glancing to the far end of the garage. One of the side doors creaked open. I saw two dark shapes move quietly through. Zach was still ranting. "You know what the difference is between me and everyone else? I don't pretend. I take what I need." He looked up just in time to see the flashlight beam hit his chest. "Police," one of the officers barked. "Don't move." Zach stumbled back, dropped the envelope. "What the hell?" They rushed in fast, pinned him against the car, cuffed him. He thrashed for a second, then froze when one of them read his rights. I stood still, breathing in short bursts, staring at the spot where he'd been standing. Later that night, I sat at the precinct, filling out paperwork. The detective walked me through every step again, asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. I didn't hesitate. Through the thin wall, I could hear Zach yelling, "He set me up! He's the thief! You think he's clean? Ask him about that photo!" I didn't respond. Didn't even look in his direction when they walked him past. They booked him for extortion, blackmail with intent to damage a professional reputation. The officer said they'd recovered several other documents from his apartment. Hard drives, flash drives, even a notebook filled with names and timestamps. They gave me back the envelope. I took it home, placed it in the drawer, and locked it. I didn't want to spend it. I didn't even want to touch it. That weekend, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at my phone. I didn't message anyone. I didn't post. I didn't even tell my parents. Not yet. The lesson stayed clear. If someone puts a knife to your neck, don't hesitate to call for help. Secrets don't kill. But the people who hold them over your head, they can. I was 29 when I finally took a week off work. Not just a day or two here and there, but a real, full week. My flight was booked, bag packed, plants watered the day before. I handed a spare key to my friend and coworker, Jay. Told him to swing by a couple times, keep the place from looking empty, maybe water the spider plant in the kitchen. We weren't best friends, but I trusted him. We'd worked together 3 years. Shared beers, rides, bad shifts, normal stuff. The trip didn't go well. Parents were tired, distant. I was bored. Weather sucked. On the 4th night, my flight back got canceled due to fog, then rescheduled earlier than expected. I grabbed the first one home, landed past midnight. Took a taxi through rain that hadn't stopped for hours. I remember staring out the window, streets all shiny and empty, thinking I should have just stayed away. When I got home, something was off before I even unlocked the door. The stairwell light was on. My apartment window glowed faint yellow through the blinds. I never leave lights on, not even by accident. Maybe Jay had stopped in and forgot. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. The hallway smelled like cigarette smoke and cheap deodorant. Mine didn't smell like that. I turned the key quietly, pushing the door open without a sound. Everything was silent. Too silent. My duffel bag was on the floor just inside the doorway. Not on the couch where I'd left it. It was open and stuffed with my clothes, clumsily jammed in, like someone packed in a rush. My phone charger hung halfway out the side pocket. The top zipper was broken. Then I saw Jay. He was standing with his back to me in the kitchen, in front of the open drawer where I kept spare batteries and tools. He didn't turn around. Just stood there like he hadn't heard me come in. His shoulders were tense. I took a step in, quietly shutting the door behind me. "Jay?" I said. He spun around so fast the drawer slammed shut behind him. His eyes were wide like he'd just seen something impossible. Sweat glistened along his forehead. He held something down at his side. "What's going on?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he muttered, "I just took a few things. I'll put it back." He raised the object slightly. It was a crowbar, a black one, heavy. It had a chip in the paint near the curve. Mine, from the utility shelf in the closet. He held it like he wasn't sure if he'd drop it or swing it. I didn't move. "Jay," I said, slower, quieter. "Let's talk." He shook his head, tight and jerky. "Don't," he said. "Just leave it." "I'm not calling anyone," I said. "Whatever's going on, we can fix it. You don't have to." He took a step forward, still holding the crowbar. His mouth twisted into a laugh. Not a happy one, not loud, just short, dry, ugly. Then he raised the crowbar a little higher. The laugh broke into motion. He lunged forward and swung the crowbar straight at my side. I stepped back just in time, felt the wind off the swing past my ribs. I grabbed the stool from under the counter and held it between us like a barrier. He didn't stop. We circled each other between the couch and the coffee table, neither saying anything now. Just heavy breathing and wet shoes squeaking against the floor. His eyes darted from the stool to my hands to the hallway. He swung again. The stool absorbed the hit with a loud crack, my grip nearly slipping. He stepped back, pivoted to the right, and his arm hit the shelf. A glass vase crashed to the floor and shattered into pieces that scattered under the table and across the rug. I didn't even look down. "I'm calling the cops!" I shouted, louder than I expected. He froze for a split second, then sprinted toward the front door. I moved before I could think. Dropped the stool, dove ahead of him, blocking the hallway. He barreled into me with his shoulder. I fell back hard, my back hitting the floor. My elbow thudded against the wall, but I grabbed for his ankle on instinct. Got a grip on his jeans just as he reached for the knob. He tried to yank free, but my hand held tight. He kicked. I didn't let go. The crowbar clanged on the floor, sliding out of his hand and under the table with a loud metallic ring. He turned and tried to kick again, but I rolled to the side, still holding on. Then he slipped out of my grip and bolted through the door. He ran down the outside stairs and into the yard. The rain hadn't stopped. The grass was wet, the wood steps slick. I stayed back, watching him sprint into the dark yard. Then his foot slid off the edge of the porch. I heard it before I saw it. His leg smacked the steps and bent at the wrong angle. The crunch was thick and wet. He screamed. I stepped outside slowly, not getting close. I didn't know if he still had something on him. He was sitting half on, half off the steps, holding his leg and yelling. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911 with shaky fingers. The rain soaked through my shirt and ran down my face as I gave the dispatcher my address and tried to explain, short and clear, what happened. Assault. Break-in. Injuries. The police showed up fast. Red and blue lights lit up the street. Jay didn't move much by then, just sat slumped, holding his knee, muttering things I couldn't hear. 2 officers approached with gloves on. One of them knelt and checked his leg, while the other kept his hand near his belt. They got him on a stretcher and braced his leg. An EMT wrapped a splint around it while another officer read him his rights. His face was pale, mouth clenched. He didn't look at me. The rain kept falling. Neighbors started coming out. Lights flipped on. I saw 3 people in robes and slippers just watching from their porches as Jay got rolled toward the ambulance. No one said anything to me. They just stared. A week later, I changed all the locks, even the window latches. Bought new ones from the hardware store, installed them myself. The insurance covered some of the stolen things. Laptop, a watch, a few small electronics he'd probably stuffed in his backpack. They didn't cover the broken trust. Jay's facing charges now. Burglary, assault with a weapon, unlawful entry. He didn't have a record before. I guess he does now. I don't know why he did it. Maybe money. Maybe something else. We haven't spoken since. I keep thinking how easy it all was. One key. One moment of trust. You give someone access to your space, and they don't just take your stuff. They tear open the idea that you're safe, that you know who people are. Be careful who you give your keys to. A person who can open your door can break open your life.